Superintendent, Mal Gill, Assistant Superintendent, and somewhere in here, hi Woody, we have Woody Radford, our other Assistant Superintendent. And trustees, starting on my far right, we have Trustee Tony Ward, Trustee Suzanne Perot, Vice Chair Shelley Coburn, and to my immediate right, we have Superintendent Gord Stewart, myself, Megan Dykeman, I'm the Chair, and to the left, acting tonight, as unfortunately Secretary Treasurer Brian Isley is unable to join us, he's not feeling well, we have the wonderful Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shin Chant. Then we have Trustee David Todd, Trustee Rod Ross, the supremely wonderful Trustee Rod Ross, and the far end, last but not least, Trustee Marnie Wilson. So thank you and welcome again. We do have to let you know that those in attendance, that we do have our meetings will be streamed live and archived and accessed online. We also reserve the right to edit or by motion of the board at any meeting choose not to stream live or archive a meeting or portion thereof. So on that note, we will call the meeting to order at 7:05 p.m. And I will start off by acknowledging that the Langley School District is located on the traditional lands of the Kwantlen, Katzie, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. And we are going to move right in to our report from in camera. Trustee Coburn.
In camera, we discuss personnel, property, and legal.
Thank you. And the first item on the agenda is that the Langley Board of Education adopts the consent agenda items as presented. Moved by Trustee Perot, seconded by Vice Chair Coburn. All those in favor? Carried. And then we will move on down to, we do need also a motion. I'm sorry, Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shin Chan, since our Secretary Treasurer cannot be here tonight, we do need mover that the Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shin Chan act as Secretary Treasurer for the purposes of the meeting. Moved by Trustee Todd, seconded by Trustee Ward. All those in favor? Carried. That means you officially can be here. You're so lucky. So now we are going to move on to consideration of the agenda. Can I please get a mover that the agenda be approved as presented? Moved by Trustee Perot, seconded by Trustee Coburn. Do we have any additions? Trustee Todd.
Yes, I did have a resolution. Either I'd like to add it's under
New business.
New business 8.1 resolution going to the BCSTA.
Okay. And Trustee Wilson.
Yes, I'd like to add under new business as well a motion regarding moving to Metro.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other additions or changes of order on the agenda? All right, so we do have a mover and seconder of the agenda, but we will now be adopting the motion that the agenda be approved as amended. All those in favor? Carried. On to item 6.1, strategic plan development.
By the provincial government in terms of our Ministry of Education of a particular area of focus that we need to look at. Some of the things that we put out for examples in there, so a draft has gone out to all the different partner groups in terms of being able to give some feedback. Some of the things that we've given for examples throughout that document are in terms of our action plans for learning, making sure that each one of the schools have one that's very effective. Balanced assessment practices, we're going to hear about our balanced literacy plan tonight. So we have staff here to share that. And again, I mentioned for the district framework for enhancing student learning that carries all kinds of different things we're doing on the learning front. Some of the things already coming out for initial conversations with the groups that I've met with. We have to make sure if we have acronyms, that the language is something that the community can certainly understand and work through. So we want to be very conscious of that we have links to any important documents. We talk about the Aboriginal Enhancement Agreement, that people would be able to absolutely access that. We also want to make sure that people understand that this is a big picture document in terms of goals that you want to attain in each of those 5 areas. You don't operationalize all these at this point in time. That takes place over the next 4 years. Otherwise, you'd have a document that would be 50 to 100 pages long. But I do, as I sit down with the groups, if they have an idea in terms of a way to operationalize a main point, I do take that in because it's something that we can use as staff as we go forward. But I say don't look for it necessarily in the document at the end. And then the wording we use, and sometimes what are some some ways we can capture things. One of them from our Director of Instruction, Don Tomlinson, rather than using entrepreneurial, use innovative, because there's so many things you can grab under there versus maybe a word that might be a little bit more restrictive in terms of entrepreneurial. So we will do entrepreneurial things within that, but don't limit it by the use of that kind of terminology. So those would be things that have initially kind of come out as I've met with people. We also had tier 1 and 2 tier supports mentioned. Again, there'd be people that go, what is that? We don't even know what that is, so you either have to explain it or find a different way to capture it. So some initial feedback around the educational opportunities. Community partnerships, we work with a whole range of different community groups on all kinds of different fronts to help our kids. We always want to work in terms of strengthening those. A lot of work around early learning initiatives. Amanda Slade here tonight in terms of one of the people that would be working on those types of things. We have our hub. We have all kinds of things that we try to do there. And we want to continue with that work. And a lot of the mental well-being, that's something that we can't do alone. We rely on our community agencies to help us with that too. And that comes up with every group. Every group mentions that around kids. They mention that around staff in terms of concerns there. This particular category, it's when we say community organizations in terms of our partners, how do you find a way to put a few examples but saying again that it's not an exhaustive in terms of including every single one that we work with. We certainly have some organizations that we work with a little bit more than others, but I want to make sure that people know that that list again is not does not necessarily cover them all. And then delineating what is something maybe external versus internal. So this isn't something we will look at our LTA or QP groups within this. They'll be covered more through our human resources goals. But we have to find a place to capture DPAC, for example. So they'd be one that we'd want to capture here going forward. So just again, some initial feedback that people have been giving as we kind of work through this. The organizational initiatives, again, wanting to make sure that we have a positive, dynamic educational climate. Encouraging innovation, encouraging efficiencies within the system. Some of the things that, again, that are coming up, that are surfacing there is a new communications plan. We've just hired a new communications manager, and that'll be something that'll be a big part of her new role, will be working with all of our groups in terms of coming up with that plan. And that's certainly probably the biggest topic in that particular area. And reviewing a middle school student success, where are we at? We've certainly been going down this road for quite some time now, and looking forward in terms of headway going forward in terms of being able to give feedback how kids are doing, and then what structures work well there. And then we also have 3 communities that don't yet have that, and what could that look like going forward. And partners are looking forward to, again, basically having the opportunity to meet our new communications manager, Joanne Abshire, who I see right there in the back. Welcome, Joanne. Welcome to come on out tonight. We're glad you made it. I wasn't sure you'd be here, so thank you for coming. And Joanne's going to be absolutely marvelous in the role, and looking forward to working with her going forward. So, finance and facilities planning. Really, the focus on this is making sure that whatever we put in place is sustainable, and that also we continue to keep ourselves in a healthy financial position. Along with, we're a growing district, so how can we continue to advocate to get those facilities, to maintain them in good shape, but get the facilities as soon as we can to meet the needs of areas like Willoughby that can obviously face some pretty tough circumstances at times in terms of the crowding going forward. What does that mean in terms of their particularly trying to keep good relationships? And this is tough. You got to advocate to the ministry in terms of the things you want, and yet you don't want to burn bridges at the same time. And that's the same with our municipalities. Fortunately, and in all of our cases right now, we have great working relationships, and that's a tribute to the staff and trustees and others that work hard in terms of making sure that that takes place. So the main one that comes out of there is that theme of advocacy, constantly advocating for our community going forward. And human resources, making sure again that we have a supportive, positive culture for all of our employees. One bullet that certainly continues to come up there again is the mental well-being of all staff. Like I said, that seems to be a theme that's prevalent throughout British Columbia right now. We also have in this particular one the ways to attract and retain staff. It's a very competitive environment out there. We're one of the fastest growing places in BC, and so you're trying to always kind of stay ahead in terms of being able to attract the very best and retain the great people we have. And the violence in the workplace. We continue to see changes in the climate out there with respect to this one. It's our Learning Support Services Department have all kinds of staff working with others in the system to try to find ways to make sure that our employees are obviously safe in the work that they do with kids. And there's certainly over the next 4 years we'll be continuing to develop some strategies to work there. So these are just some initial themes that have circulated out as I've kind of gone out and met with people. Ultimately, the document we capture, just to give an idea, will come in a format with graphics. We've got some great graphics out there already. We want to obviously have some pictures of kids and things like that. That's what we're all about. But again, you even think about with 5 categories, if you had even 5 or 6 or 7 bullets in there, that in itself is already giving you 25 to 35 different things to take on. You want to be careful in terms of that we don't have such an exhaustive list that we don't ever feel like we're accomplishing anything. So if we can kind of get those nailed down in terms of being able to capture these in about 5 bullets in each category, I think we can do some great work working with all of our partner groups in terms of operationalizing these going forward. Again, the only difference in this first year, we're going to take some time to celebrate the great things that have been done over the last 4 years, because there's been an absolute ton of great work, and we do need to spend some time acknowledging it. Otherwise, we'll have our folks out there thinking, can you never be pleased, in terms of always pushing us to do more and more. Today, that's kind of who I've had the chance. So it's just me. I just kind of go out, sit with the groups. QP 1851, DPAC, exempt staff, QP 1260, LTA, and meet with the LPBPA as part of the superintendent's meeting. We do that one tomorrow. So we'll have as many administrators there as we can to do the first round. And all I'm doing in that is giving out the document. It's a public document. People can feel free to give their input, but I ask that they give it back to one contact within each of those groups and then bring it back to me. The timeline on that right now is I'm trying to get as much of that back by February 22nd. That's the day after DPAC meeting, February 21st, where they're going to have an opportunity to, they've taken the document away, and that'll be their first chance to share their thoughts in the first round. After February 22nd, I'll take all that input and do another draft, and then bring that back out and say, okay, this is what I've heard. This is what I'm looking at bringing to trustees at the end of April. And again, get any last thoughts in terms of any other changes that need to be made. Bring it to our strategic plan team meeting with our trustees, and then get it to the April 30th meeting, and then present that in May to our community partners. So that's the track we're on. I've really appreciated the conversations that I've been able to have already with all of the different groups. And it's something, you know what, I think people appreciate where they can get a chance with me just to kind of not only talk about the document, but have an opportunity just to share their thoughts in terms of how we're doing as a district, and you know, just the chance for the conversation. So I'm looking forward to that continuing going ahead, and that would be my report and update to this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Appreciate the thorough update. We do have a speakers list starting, and the first speaker is Trustee Todd. Over to you.
So thank you so much for tonight's summary of what has taken place so far. Alison McVeigh said something before she left about being champions for education. And I just want to acknowledge and kind of say that you're role modeling right now a collaborative champion, because you're actually going out and you're wanting to give feedback. And I love the fact that people are being honest with you in these meetings where they're saying, too much edu-speak. The acronyms, we really want to know, because the first thing that many partners, they go, whoa, you're talking about something, and we as fast as you can, as slow as you need to. And if you start throwing out some things, they get quickly lost in a conversation about education. And that's what we want to have, those authentic conversations. And of course, we want to be champions for not just a good, but a great public education system. And even the tweaking, like entrepreneurial to innovative, that's a good start, because you've now expanded the focus. So I see it's headed in a great direction. One thing I thought about just as you were going through this list is just an open house for public too, because not everybody fits into a partner group, and maybe there's an open house concept where other people don't feel like, oh, well, I'm not DPAC, I'm not CUPE, but I am involved in my school, maybe below the radar of their PAC or their DPAC, just something along those. And I know, ironically, I'm going to say about our open houses for budget, but maybe there is an appetite for an open house around the strategic plan. So, and I'm excited about the next 4 years, and I think you're off to a great start. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions or comments on this item, so we'll start off by getting a mover, please, that the Board of Education receives the report on strategic plan development for information as presented. Moved by Trustee Wilson, seconded by Trustee Ross. Are there any other comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. So now we're moving into 6.2, which are information items. So I'll hand this over to the superintendent to take us through the next 4 items under there.
Great, thank you, Chair Dykeman. Yeah, don't want to go chairman. I'm going to call staff forward on this particular one. I'm going to call forward Karen Beatty and Joanne Nouveau. I think Joanne going to join you there, and Lisa Sadler. Okay, and so Karen is our outgoing ELL Swiss district principal. Last day is tomorrow, Thursday. So Karen, we had a chance at our last great work, and we've had an opportunity throughout the district to really take to say how much we appreciated her work in this area. Been a phenomenal employee with us for the Langley School District, but we weren't going to let her get away without one more chance out here. An issue that has surfaced through the ELL consortium that Trustee Wilson's been taking part in, also in terms of making sure that we receive the funding we need to meet the needs of families. So, and particularly, there are some gaps there, and they're going to have a chance tonight to kind of bring all of the trustees information that I think you need in terms of this, because I think there's a possible motion coming out of this one. So on that note, I will turn it over to you, Karen.
So this is a presentation that was done at the consortium meeting in January, and I'm a little lost here. I'm good? Okay. At that meeting, we co-presented with these other school districts, and we talked about the past, present, and future of Swiss, so that we could provide background and what we would like to see going forward. So Settlement Workers in Schools is an innovative delivery model. It's a comprehensive school-based settlement program that maximizes the integration of immigrant and refugee families and students, and we do this through a seamless and systematic delivery model, recognizing that schools are natural community hubs and often the first place of contact for newcomers. So in the past, back in 2006, unlike other areas in Canada, school districts were given the opportunity to provide services, and that was due to a study done by the Ministry of the Attorney General's Office, Settlement and Multicultural Branch, and the Ministry of Education. And they felt that school districts and settlement agencies should all have the opportunity to provide school-based settlement services, recognizing there's a high demand for services, there were gaps in the available services, and schools were in a good position to provide services to newcomers and connect them to the community. They felt that it would build on existing relationships with school districts and community agencies. So in that funding model, between 2007 and 2009, 21 school districts took part in the funding and were awarded a grant, direct funding, through the Ministry of Attorney General's Office. And the money came from CIC, which was Citizenship Immigration Canada, and went to the province, and then the province of BC distributed it to settlement agencies and school districts. Other provinces in Canada were not following this model. So in the past, we were able to provide service to permanent residents, naturalized Canadian citizens, refugee claimants, temporary residents that had children in school, so that would have been people on work permits and study permits, and children born in Canada to immigrant parents.
Sure. So under this model with the funding from the provincial government, there was a number of highlights that I'll just talk about. So in 2011, there was 1,000 schools across 21 school districts in BC that were providing settlement services to 40,000 clients. So that would be parents and students. Within the school district, within all the school districts, there was access to wraparound supports like ELL teachers, and then other supports for special needs students, and all those resources that school districts have for students. There was a lot of collaboration and sharing that went on in districts, who we put this presentation together with, and we call ourselves Integrate Canada, and that's all of the school districts that have the Swiss funding currently. And then school systems have an increased capacity and understanding of settlement issues. So this is change that we've seen happen within the schools that we're working in, where there's more understanding about diversity and inclusion of immigrant and refugee students. And then of course there's in-kind support from school districts, including admin support, resources, office space, staff, professional development, lots of things like that. And then of course we find that one of the big benefits to having settlement workers in schools, they're not limited by FOIPA where other agencies would be, and so there's a lot more information sharing that can happen around students. And of course, one of the biggest things is that there's quicker access to immigrant and refugee students and families, because neighborhood schools are usually the first point of contact for immigrants when they arrive in Canada. So a couple of the successes that we've heard as well from schools would be, again, that Swiss workers are part of the school district and have knowledge and experience working within the system. And then this is one that's really more a benefit to our other school district partners, where they have a coordinated model of support through a welcome center. And we're not quite there yet. We don't have the numbers, but maybe someday we'll get there in Langley. And then again, of course, the working relationship that each of our settlement workers has with community agencies to make sure that our students receive holistic supports.
So in our present system, back in 2014, Citizenship Immigration Canada took over the settlement services in British Columbia. School districts that decided to keep the funding in and keep their Swiss programs in the district now have to participate in a competitive call for proposal. And there was a reduction in program budgets as a result of the CIC funding model. So the CIC bases their funding on landing numbers and does not include secondary migration. So for example, in Langley, the people that we gave service to the last 2 years, only 21% families chose Langley as their first destination. So we're kind of hurt by this funding model. And in this funding model as well, it's an increasing need or a large group of families that move in, supplemental funding is offered on really short timelines, 3 months or 6 months, and it's very difficult to really provide staffing and to deliver a good program to meet the needs of newcomers when you have lots of restrictions and really short timelines. And another real challenge is that the federal budgets don't align with our academic school calendars. So they go from April 1st to March 31st. That's their contract year. And an example of that is that this year, we just found out last week, what our funding was going to be for April 1st. So it puts, you know, we're always kind of guessing and trying to figure out how are we going to manage till we know for sure what our budget is going to be. Go ahead.
Okay, and so one of the biggest challenges that we've seen since 2014 is a number of the clients we were serving are now considered ineligible. So that would include naturalized Canadian citizens, so people that have had their citizenship test and become Canadians, refugee claimants, temporary residents, so that would be people on work permits and study permits, so such as post-secondary study permits, not international students, living caregivers, and then of course children that are born in Canada to immigrant parents. And so in Langley, probably our biggest number of ineligible clients are the naturalized Canadian citizens and children born in Canada, but we have a growing number of temporary residents, and we're seeing this trend across districts, is that the immigration models are shifting, and so more people are coming under work permits to settle in Canada. And so these are kind of some of the numbers across districts. So in the green, that would be clients that are eligible for settlement for Swiss service, and in the red is clients that are ineligible that we're still serving anyways, even though we're not funded. And so it's ranging between about 25 and 35% district to district, and it's growing. It's a growing percentage each year. And this is just a recent news article that kind of speaks to that, this trend that we're seeing happen where we're seeing a lot of people moving west to BC from other provinces, settling in the Lower Mainland. And a lot of these people are refugee claimants, people that have come on study permits and are now settling into the country, and people on work permits.
So, are we on the right
that's
slide?
still me, I think.
I don't know the slide.
Seeing this trend, last year was the first year we were eligible to apply for some provincial funding to support those ineligible students. So all of the districts did apply for that funding, and we were all unsuccessful. In particular, in Langley, all of our agencies that are Langley-based lost that funding. So now families we have to refer them over to Surrey or other organizations.
Yeah. So going forward, what we really would like to see is going back to grant model, where we would need to submit a business plan and with annual budgets, but not have to participate in a call for proposal competition. We'd love to see our fiscal year aligned with the school year as well. And have a little more flexibility with the financial management and the budgets, and be able to move line items with a little more, have more flexibility in that respect. And we feel very confident that we would be able to provide output and outcomes-based reporting on an annual basis to support the work we do. We'd like to see predictable and increased long-term stable funding so that we were able to plan properly and have more flexibility. We'd also like to be able to be responsive to the changes in client needs and demographics, and allowed to provide to everyone who needed settlement support, not just eligible clients. And one of the things we've asked for a number of years is to have a steering committee to represent Swiss interests across both governments, federal and provincial. And so these are the people that presented this particular presentation at the ESL Consortium meeting. And we all work together. That's it. So, okay, now. Do I have to press a button here?
Yes, so if you could press the button on, and it has the looks like voice waves coming out. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. It was very informative. We do have some questions. I see we have a bit of a speakers list, so I'm going to start off with Vice Chair Coburn.
I'm wondering if you could go back about 3 slides to the slide before future recommendations. Yeah, just the one before. So, hub and spoke. Right. Can you, and I could have missed it, or could you summarize for me, if you know, why that was?
Oh, so the provincial government was providing, for the Langley Surrey area, they were providing $80,000, that's it, for ineligible clients. And they were doing a hub and spoke model. So Surrey was the hub, and then Langley, Delta were spokes. And so they wanted people to apply to provide services to all those regions.
Just quickly, for the benefit of those watching at home, we do have a few logged in.
Yes.
Your voice doesn't pick up if you're speaking unless you're logged in. So although I can clear the list, watch this. It's me. When you speak, if you could press, and then Vice Chair Coburn, when it's your turn, if you could, and then I'll be over here, the ref, clearing everybody's queue.
Okay, so you want me to talk about the
Press your button.
Press the button. There you go.
Oh my God.
That's the most exciting we've had here in a long time.
She's in the queue. Good.
Thanks. Okay, so the hub and spoke model, and I'll ask Lisa to jump in if I'm not explaining this right. The provincial government was providing funding for multiple regions together, and so the hub in our instance was Surrey, and the spoke was Langley and Delta, and they were giving out $80,000 for the hub and spoke together, and that's just how the funding was provided.
To maybe fill you in a little bit further back in case there's a bigger question of what this funding was about is somehow between the federal government and the provincial government they decided that the federal government will fund permanent residents and the government will be responsible for all of those ineligible clients. And so our community agencies have applied for this funding in the past. School districts weren't eligible to apply for it. And so that is to serve that they've decided fall under a provincial jurisdiction. Would be those work permits, study permits, refugee claimants, and I'm proud the naturalized Canadian citizens. Does that kind of fill in some of the gaps?
No, it made more gaps.
Oh, sorry.
It's
Questions, but thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Great. So now we have Trustee Wilson.
Actually, I'll go last if that's okay.
Okay, over to you, Trustee Ross.
Thank you. So my question is about context. I understand the refugee claimant and why that would take up a lot of your time. And when you talk about work permits as being a real growing area, so people the way they're getting into the country is via a work permit. And so how many, give me a context, how big is that? And these study permits, how many people are we actually talking about here?
So in Langley, I pulled the numbers. For this year, we have 186 students on work permits, but that number has, I think, doubled since 2014. And in other districts, that number is a lot bigger. I don't have the numbers in front of me, just Langley's, but to kind of compare that, last year we served 817 clients that were eligible for Swiss services, and we're still doing our best to serve all these clients that aren't eligible. We're just not able to support them as much. We try to include them in workshops and group sessions and help them with language where possible, but we can't give them really in-depth service. We just don't have the time.
I'm so loud as it is. I have a question then for clarification. So when people come in on a work permit, do they bring children with them? Yes. And do those children end up in the Langley School District?
Okay, so, yeah, and study permits as well, if the parents are going to post-secondary. The provincial government offers free education. So those students end up in schools, but the parents have virtually no support services at all available to them, so they don't know how school works. You know, they don't understand the systems, they may not understand the healthcare, and their children can come in with different needs as well, and they often come in speaking in another language. So they don't have the ability to communicate with their school. So, yeah, there are needs.
Workers come in on permits, and they bring children that come into the Langley School District that require services, because when you started it was the parents don't have support, but really it's the kids. When I listened to your list, it was language, it was all of these things. So really it's the kids that need that support too. So they are ineligible for any funding if they're coming in. The district doesn't receive under this model funding for.
So they're funded like any other Canadian child. So they're eligible for ESL. They're eligible for all school services. It's just that there is no support available through settlement, but they often have settlement needs.
So then the district would be picking up that.
Yes.
Just before you buzz in, Trustee Todd, Trustee Ward has been trying to get your microphone to work.
First, but I can go out.
We'll let you go, and that's going to be Trustee Todd. So you're up.
Oh, I'm.
So, I don't know how to formulate this question exactly, but with respect to work parents or non-permanent residents, how many of those, or what percentage are we looking at that will end up immigrating and staying? Like my thoughts here, obviously you want to support any student, but if this is a workaround for international students, instead of where they get funding versus paying for it, which I'm just wondering if how many stick around.
Okay. The
Oh.
provincial government. Okay. Is promoting this because what they're seeing is that families, you know, they have lots of people coming here for education. And then they go elsewhere. We're educating them. They're paying to be international students. We're educating them, and then they live elsewhere. And so here they've got a group of families, people on work permits. We know they can work. They can get jobs, right? People with study permits, they end up educated. And the intention is to attract them to stay, because those are the families who want to stay. People who are educated and people who will work and can work. So it is very intentional, and it's I think they just put out a news bulletin that they're planning on increasing across Canada more work and study permits, allowing more.
The challenge we see is that those first few years of settlement are really critical, and so when they don't receive any settlement services until they become permanent residents, you've missed a very critical time for integrating newcomers. So, and I would agree with Karen, the majority of them do stay here. Yeah.
Now, Trustee Todd.
Thank you. So I believe the old adage applies here. You can pay me now or you'll pay me later. Certainly when it comes to settlement workers and the critical work settlement workers do in school, to me, it's like a no-brainer. You want refugees, you want new immigrants to integrate as well as possible, both for the children in our schools, but for the parents that are supporting those children, those family units. So nothing could be better than to do this. So hopefully you're coming in with some kind of support measure that may be coming down the line. But basically, if there's anything that I assume you're asking for, anything we can do to move this issue forward, we look forward to hearing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Wilson.
Okay, so I just want to say that I'm so happy as a trustee that I got appointed to be part of the ELL consortium, and I've been pretty amazed in the short time that I've been part of it, the work that they have been able to accomplish. So I do want to point out one fact that I think it's important to note, that when that child is in the classroom and there's an ineligible and an eligible child, but they need the exact same amount of supports and are going through the same things, our Swiss workers are just amazing. And I know that they have to spread themselves thin and that they should be funded better for this, but they do amazing work. And so I think it's important we recognize that. And so at our last meeting at the ELL Consortium, we all invited our MLAs and MPs to attend as well on January 29th. And we had MP Jenny Kwan, MP John Aldag, MLA Mabel Elmore, MLA John Isaac, and Donna Burke, assistant to MP Carla Qualtrough, all in attendance. And all of those politicians, after watching the PowerPoint and listening to some of the stories, there was some stories that were very connected to actual children and very powerful. They all agreed that this is a nonpartisan issue and that people can be doing more and work together to help solve this. So since that time, the chair of the ELL Consortium, Val Windsor from Delta, Trustee Windsor, and as well as Trustee Jennifer Reddy from Vancouver and a staff member, Heather Hart, have been invited to, they've met with Carla Qualtrough, and they've also been invited to Ottawa by Jenny Kwan to speak at the Standing Committee on Immigration. So something of note that we found out from having all those people attend the meeting is that there's approximately a pot of $50 million that the government gives out to provinces to help with asylum seekers. And the three provinces that currently are splitting up that $50 million are Quebec, Ontario, and Manitoba. And BC has more asylum seekers than Manitoba, yet we get none of that funding. So that was something they were going to start to work on immediately, is to see why we aren't in that. Jenny Kwan also told us that the majority of ineligible categories that we had listed there, those refugees become eligible in the majority of the cases, but the paperwork backlog is often 5 to 7 years. And so there's no retro services that you can now send back and help those students that should have been getting that funding back then. So out of that, a subcommittee formed at the ELL Consortium, and we met last week and we talked about how to focus our advocacy work with different levels of government. And the first step was to bring a motion to our board, and so I will move my motion. I move that the Langley School Board send letters to the Honourable Ahmed D. Hussain, MP, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, and Robert Oliphant, MP, Chair of the IRCC Committee, requesting that clients ineligible for settlement services be added to the eligible list and that funding be increased to accommodate this change.
Okay, so Trustee Wilson has moved that motion. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Trustee Todd. So Trustee Wilson, would you like to speak further?
Yes, so the rationale in speaking to this motion is, as Canada welcomes newcomers to our country, it is difficult to understand why funding to help newcomers with settlement challenges are provided only for eligible clients. Those deemed to be ineligible are downloaded onto other levels of government without the funding to support programs needed to help newcomers settle in Canada. In our public school system in British Columbia, we support all students and families who walk through our doors. Our goal is to help families settle into our communities so their children can benefit from the education our system provides. Newcomers come to Canada to make a better life for their families. They want to be productive, contributing members to Canadian society and to pay their way as they are able. Over the years, the numbers of newcomers, both eligible and ineligible, have increased. However, the funding has not kept up with the rising numbers. The number of ineligible clients has risen the most, and yet they are not recognized for funding purposes. So I hope we will all vote in favor of this motion.
Are there any other speakers to this motion? I don't see any other speakers. Just before we vote, I just want to say thank you for the passionate work that you do. Oh, you weren't quick enough. I'm going to still make my comments and you can
Make
go.
them away.
So thank you for the passionate work you have done on this committee. It really, you've taken the time and really dived in on something. And I served on this committee when I started as a trustee. Our district was in a very different place and percentage and need, and it was I learned so much from Karen, and the drives in were just so informative. So the work of a trustee on that's committed is wonderful. So I do want to just thank you for everything that you've done on this committee, and then just pass it over. Vice Chair Coburn has a comment.
Yeah, I'm happy to support this motion because from what it sounds like and what I've understood, it's all too common, the downloading of responsibilities to the public school system, because it's well known that educators will pick up the slack and they'll help any child regardless of if that child is funded or not, which further stretches a system that is already stretched to capacity in terms of human capital in general. So I think that it's time that we stop expecting our people to do this amount of work when really one person can only do so much. So I would be happy to support this, and thank you for your work and your time.
All right, so I do not have any more speakers on the list. So all those in favor? Are there any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Once again, thank you so much for coming out tonight on this presentation. You are going to be missed. We're excited to work with you, but we thanked you last time, but once again, thank you so much for everything you have done for this district, and best of luck on your future endeavors, and please don't be a stranger. Thank you. You take care. And they're live streamed now. So moving on, Superintendent, we have 6.2.2, the middle years development instrument.
Thank you, Chair Dykeman. At this time, I'm going to call on Director of Instruction, Dawn Tomlinson. See, she's joined by Gail Markin there, also one of our fantastic teachers in the district. And so they're going to look at give us some information from the Middle Years Development Instrument. This is a self-report questionnaire completed by children in grades 4 and grade 7. This is one of our sources of data that we use for our strategic plan amongst many. And so they're going to give some of the information we've gleaned from that and give an opportunity for some questions. And I will turn it over to Dawn.
Instruments that we use in our district and that other school districts use to gather information about students that's not of an academic nature. One is the early development instrument that we use with kindergarten students. We use that every 3 years. And then the other one is the middle years development inventory, which we do use at grade 4 and grade 7. And the information, the data that we collect from students in these instruments really helps inform us as a school district as to what are some of the things that we need to address in terms of students' strengths and assets, things that they bring to the table, or needs that they have in order to be ready to learn. But it also informs our community. So all of the community organizations that we partner with, it informs them in terms of creating programs and initiatives that are going to help support our families. So these are really important instruments, and Gail is our district teacher in instructional services of social emotional learning. She is responsible for supporting schools and implementing the MDI, and then taking the results, sharing them out, and then working with instructional services and working with schools to define what might the next steps be from the information we. So I've asked Gail to explain what it is, what it looks like, what kind of information we gather, what our results were from last year, and what she is currently doing with schools in terms of addressing some of those pieces that we've been informed on.
Cool, thanks, Dawn. So thank you very much for having me here to talk about the Middle Years Development Inventory. It's something that I feel very passionate about. It's all about social emotional learning and the voices of children. Self-report survey for children in grades 4.
what the research has shown is that children in grade 4 are able to do self-report to the same level as adults would be, so it's a reliable and valid tool. What we know about childhood development is that we've done a lot of research, or in the past we had a lot of research on the younger age groups and in the adolescence, but not quite as much in the middle childhood years. So the MDI gives us a little bit of data around this important part of child development. We used to think it was kind of the latency period, and now we realize that it's quite important. The MDI is used at a population level, so it's not meant to assess individual students in any way. It's meant to give us an overall picture of trends over time, as well as give us ideas about things that are happening in a population, school population, district population, community group. So why is it important? Dawn spoke to some of those things. It is a way that we can hear the voices of children. It also is a way that informs our decisions around supporting their social emotional wellness and their well-being in general. It's also a time of a great change during these years. So cognitively, they're being more self-aware, more aware of other people around them. They're being more socially connected to their peers, and adults are really important in their lives at that point. They're starting to notice things around them. A lot more academically, this is a time of change because they're starting in grade 4 to have letter grades, a little bit more of an academic challenge at that point, and of course their bodies are changing physically. So it is a time of great change and opportunity, but also can be a time of great stress on children. So this is an important transitional time of life. Just a little graph about the MDI participation. As you can see, it's been growing over time and is covering a lot of our province, and a lot of other school districts are using the data from the MDI as well. I suspect that is continuing to grow this year and into the future. It's also starting to move across Canada. So the MDI has 5 dimensions, including all of these, which we know are things that are connected to students' health and well-being. In grade 4, they have 77 questions on the MDI covering all these different areas, and 101 in grade 7. And these are some of them. So social emotional development, these are the kind of things that would fit underneath there, and the things that they add in grade 7. They're looking at physical health and well-being, and some of the things that you see under there are the things that we know impact kids. And I'm just going to sort of move through them quite quickly, just so you can see what kind of things are connected under these 5 different dimensions. We know that connectedness is important for belonging in schools, and connectedness to adults, and who are the important adults, and friends and peer information as well. And then they were also curious about after school time. So this is between 3 and 6 o'clock in the evening, and they ask questions for students as to where they are and what they're doing and how they're spending their time. There's also some school experience measures, asking them questions around school belonging, what are their goals, and seeing how they're doing at school. There are also 2 indices on the MDI. So the first one is a well-being index. So they take 5 of the things that we know are critical measures of well-being and put them in a sort of combined score so we can get a sense of their overall well-being. And it looks like this. So the students who are reporting positive responses on 4 or 5 of the measures are in the green. You'll want to remember this for later when we see the actual data. If you have less than 4 of the positive responses, you're in the medium. And if they have even 1 of the negative responses, then they're in the red zone. And these are, of course, the things they're measuring. The other thing they have, the other indice, is the assets indicator. So this is things that we know support students' health and well-being. So we want to know their percentage or the amount that they report having these assets. Because we know as the number of assets increase, so does their well-being. So we want to get a sense of that. So what the MDI does is it takes all of that data and produces a community report. And it also divides it into neighborhoods. That's what that one in the center is, and you'll see some of our data from Langley coming up there. There's also a technical guide. So all of this is online. The district reports and the provincial, like other districts, reports are on there as well. And you can see the community maps. It's all online and open to the public. The school reports themselves are sent only to the schools, so those are not available online. So here's some of our results from last year. So these are students that were in grade 4 last year and are in our grade 5 students this year. This is the well-being index. And I'm going to sort of run through these fairly quickly as well, but you'll notice that we're fairly close to the provincial, and they say all participating districts, because it starts across the whole province. And the asset index, and this is always an interesting one. I like how they do the different colors, because then we can look at the ones that are darker are always the higher percentages. Of course, they have the percentages right there as well. And, you know, so you look at something like nutrition and sleep at 66%, and of course that makes you have more questions. So you go looking further into the data. They have divided it out into all of the different areas, and I just picked a couple here for you. This is optimism, one of my favorite things. You'll notice the black bar at the end. That's the provincial data. So you'll see, again, we're fairly close on all the different measures to what the rest of the province is doing. There's one on self-esteem, general health. These are the percentages of students who report eating breakfast in the morning. So you kind of get a sense of what the data looks like. Again, for grade 4s, I always add this one because the sleep one gets a lot of interest when you're talking with parents particularly, but also, honestly, when you're talking with the students, they're quite interested in that one as well. Just to give you a sense, this is our grade 4 neighborhood map data, and you'll probably want to look at it in more depth at some point, but this is our well-being index, so you get a sense of different areas of our district that have higher percentages than others because of the colors. This again is nutrition and sleep. So yeah, it always is one that always interests me. After school activities, again, good to know, especially for our community partners and people that are trying to decide what activities to do for kids. So, and here's our grade 7 results. These are our grade 8s this year. This is from last year's data. Again, well-being index, fairly similar to the province. Our assets, again, somewhat similar to what they were in grade 4, a little bit different. You can see the percentages there. And again, just pulled out a couple of the slides from our grade 7 data. They ask questions about happiness. There's their general health. Relationships, adult relationships at school. That's always a good one for us to look at because it's important. Peer belonging. Again, eating breakfast. Thought it might be good to sort of have a comparison or a little idea between grade 4 and 7. And frequency of good sleep. Here's our neighborhood maps from grade 7. I'll try and go through these quickly too. There's our well-being index for grade 7. Our adult relationships. There's nutrition and sleep. And there's our after-school activities. So just what do we do with this data? So I think when Dawn was introducing it, she talked about a few of these things, but it really is a wonderful way to inform our school and our district action plans for learning, to hear from the kids' voices themselves as to what's going on for them and their experiences of their own health and wellness. Again, like we mentioned, informing the work of our community partners. They're actually the Langley Children's Committee is working with the data and working with the people from UBC to bring together a community event using our data this year. So that's quite exciting. I don't think they've put it all out there yet. They're kind of pulling it together because they are taking it seriously and wanting to use this information and hear the students' voices. The third one is just around helping parents and teachers support their own students' health and well-being. So what kind of lessons do we want to do based on what's going on in our school and what our students' needs and interests are? And the last one, of course, this is my favorite one, student learning and empowerment. And right now, this is a class at Yorkson Creek. And what we are doing is we're taking the MDI data from last year to the students in grade 7 this year. And we're saying, you know, here's the data from your school. What do you think? And so we're having lessons around their own health and wellness and what they have said, and now they're looking at it and sort of saying this is interesting and having discussions. And the challenge, of course, after that is to, you know, see what you might do from that. But it's really great. There's 3 schools that are working on that. And the thing that's also exciting is it's pretty new to take the data back to the students. So UBC is quite interested that we're doing this. They're coming to see some of these lessons and to see how we're doing it so they can spread it around the province. So pretty proud of the work we're doing here in Langley. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Presentation. We do have a speakers list. I'm going to clear the speakers on here, and then we did have Trustee Perot, and then Trustee Todd, and then Trustee Rod. So
thank you, Gail, so much for such important information and diving into the heart of this stuff. It's critical for us to understand the needs of our students in our community, and so I thank you for your heart and passion in that. I have a lot of questions, but I won't monopolize all our time tonight. In terms of parent involvement and accessing them to the information, what is your approach to that?
Well, we would love to get the information out to the parents. So hopefully in PAC meetings and at DPAC meetings, hopefully at this community event, sort of spreading it out to our parent community so that they can come and join other people within our community to do some of that, looking at the data.
May I ask one more question? So sorry. Clear the panel. You may have said this, I was trying to follow the slides quickly, regarding the breakfast, children who are eating breakfast and not eating breakfast. I don't know if the slide came up because I was swinging around. However, the demographic group that has the low, are we able to identify where that low is, and are we addressing that in the district in terms of breakfast programs already? Can we hone in on that a little bit more to address that and lift that demographic group up?
Yeah. I'm good? Okay. Yeah, we can definitely narrow it down, right? That's the wonderful thing about the MDI is they do have it in neighborhoods, but they also have it by school. So you can actually, I mean, the school data is available to the school principals get that. So in the school you can see, you know, what are your numbers at your school? What percentage of your students are not having breakfast? And what I really love too about the idea of it is maybe getting the kids talking about that, right? What's going on, right? But yes, you certainly can narrow it down and try and make your decisions based on it.
thank you. So Trustee Todd.
Thank you. Again, it's as many questions as if you answered. As many questions as you answered, you probably provoked many others too. Just curious, are we able to see whether our middle schools are actually doing better in meeting some of the needs of the grade 7s than our more traditional K-7 schools? Are we able to kind of glean that and actually look, you know, because that helps us inform our decisions. And yeah, and the second question, but I'll save you for
certainly we can, I mean, we have school data, right? So we have community data, we know where our middle schools are, that kind of thing. We have data from last year, and we have data from 2 years ago, and we will have data this year. So it's not a long-term number of years. So I'd probably want to be careful of interpreting it in that way, but we certainly can have a look at those things.
So maybe to facilitate it, if you could just raise your hand if it's going to be a podium one. So otherwise I have to clear for it to go back to the podium. So the idea would be, I have seen you, so I've got Trustee Ross, and then I have Trustee Tony Ward next. So we'll let this change of questions, and I'll look towards the next speaker, and then you buzz, and then I'm not having to sort of do the ding and call everybody's out, and then everybody has to re-queue. So we will finish up these questions, then move on to Trustee Ross, and then on to Trustee Ward.
Were you satisfied with the sample? Like, we seem to have 1,300 students in Langley that participated. Is that correct, or is that a significant sample? Like, I don't know enough about sampling to make sure that that's a good sample to base, you know, findings upon.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember the exact number too, although I agree it was somewhere around that. We certainly have a fairly large participation rate. I can't, you know, remember it exactly at this point. I would like to guess around 86%. It does say that if you go look. Students, we send parent letters out, and parents can opt out for their students, so ask them not to do it. But in general, I think parents are pretty happy to, and you know, students are happy to do it when they understand what it is too. So I think our participation rates are pretty good. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So over to Trustee Ross. Sorry.
Thank you. I understand kids are hungry, and I understand that that we have a system in place. We've got the foundation working double time. Finding money for food is not a problem in the Langley School District. It's really quite amazing. Now let's go to the sleep issue. I'm quite surprised by the numbers up there on the sleep thing. So I'm saying, gee, what do we do now then? I understand food, but sleep. How do you? What's our solution there to bring those numbers in line?
I love that question. I think it's multifaceted. Of course, I personally would love to engage, and I am starting to engage the kids in that conversation. Self-report measure, you know, what are they noticing? It's actually quite interesting when you actually pull up the data, because it gives you times, like the number of kids that said they went to bed after 9 o'clock or before 9 o'clock or after midnight. Yeah, so I would want to ask the kids. I'd want to get the information to parents. I'd want to have the conversations and try and figure out what's going on, and then make a plan. Yeah. On it.
Thank you. Are those all your questions, Trustee Ross? Okay, so over to Trustee.
I'll learn. Okay. I know it's pretty straightforward. Slow learner. I've got a number of questions. Maybe I'll just throw out a few of them, and you can pick which one you want to answer. But to piggyback on what Rod was saying, I was wondering, can we see, or is there a list that can be disclosed of the questions? I mean, as a parent, I'd want to kind of know, not that I'm going to force feed them the same questions, and then, but I'd want to know kind of what those are. And then another one, again, choose to answer whichever ones. Do the questions change, and do the questions change based on the age or the year they're in? And I'm going to throw out a couple more, and then, again, just answer whatever you want here. I think it's volunteer participation, as you noted. And another question, are there even samples from each area? So are we like versus like? So when we see Aldergrove and we see Willoughby, or we see Walnut Grove or Fernridge or Brookswood, do we have the same numbers who to give an kind of an equal representation, so that to the point of fair sampling? So we understand that it's, because I mean, when I look there, I see Aldergrove 78 and Brookswood is 86 in one particular thing, and it gives me cause for concern, maybe in an area, but maybe not if the sampling is small in Aldergrove. So those are some questions.
Oh. All right. Yeah, as to start off with the questions, if a parent or any of you wanted to see the questions, it is online. They have a it's a data guidebook that's got all of a whole bunch of, you know, the details about the questions, but also how they put the data together and all those reliability measures. And yeah, it's quite good. You certainly could see the participation rate in different, and the numbers of kids who took the survey. So if you were sort of looking at different communities, you could definitely see how many people participated in the survey, for instance. Now I can't remember what the other ones were, but okay.
All right, so thank you, and thank you for coming out to do this presentation tonight. It was really informative, and so we really do appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you back again with your next one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, yes, absolutely. All right, so Superintendent, we're on to Balanced Literacy Plan 6.2.3.
Thank you, Chair Degman. It's nice to see so many educational items on there. No shot at Mr. Isley or that he's away, but the finance being off and education on there. I'm loving every minute of it. So, great opportunity here. This is something in terms of strategic plan and district action plan, our school action plans around literacy. We've got work to do there. This is tremendously important work in terms of kids making sure they're literate and numerate when they go on to graduate, to give them the skills they can to be successful. And at grade 3, we're trying to make sure that they are reading at grade level. And I really appreciate the efforts. Got a strong team here joining Dawn here tonight. I'm not sure how many are partaking in the presentation. She'll coax various people up throughout. Yes. And so I'll let you do introductions, and really looking forward to the presentation on the Balanced Literacy Guide. Take it away.
So what we're going to share this evening is the structures and supports that we're putting in place in the 3rd year of the Balanced Literacy Plan. For those of you trustees who have been on the board, you have an idea of what I'm talking about. I thought it was really important to do a little bit more of an overview tonight and just some updates about where we are. As Gord said, this is very much tied to our strategic plan and our goal of students reading at grade level by the time they leave the primary program. And I wanted to tell you a little story actually from my own work in a secondary school. And the reason why that grade 3 target to me is so important and really resonated with me when I came into this position and saw our reading results and thought we need to do some really serious work around this. When I was a principal at Langley Secondary, we started looking at our completion rates, our graduation rates, and there was certainly a sense of urgency in our school. Our completion rates were not very good at the time. And we started digging into who are the students, who are the names, who are the faces of those students that are not graduating, and what are their stories. And one of the things that we did was we started to backtrack and look at their data as they went through the school system. And there was a direct correlation with, I will say, too many of our students that were not completing with what their reading results were, and they were not meeting at grade 3. And so grade 3 is a really important time. At grade 1 and 2, the student may not be reading at grade level. It might take a little bit more time. But, you know, once they are leaving grade 3, the curriculum changes a little bit. Sometimes the approach changes a little bit. Sometimes people don't think that they still need to teach reading, and yet some of the students are not quite there yet. So we're really focused on that. So when we say this is our goal, to have them reading at grade level by the time they reach grade 3, what about those who haven't? What are we doing for those? So the focus of the Balanced Literacy Plan is K to 8. What can we do? What are the supports that we can put in place to improve our literacy instruction, to use evidence-based, research-based strategies, instructional strategies, to bring some consistency to our approach to teaching literacy throughout our district. And we really believe that if we can get to that place, we're going to make a big difference for kids in terms of this work. And I know the board has seen the primary reading results, and as I said, they're not where they should be. They're not even close to where they should be. And there are many factors that we can theorize about what's happening here. But one of the things we do have control over is how we teach literacy. So we're really working on that. I have a fantastic elementary instructional services team for district teachers that are key to this work. I want to just introduce all 4 of them, and then what I'd like to do is have 2 of them come up and take you through a little bit of the work that we've been doing around the Balanced Literacy Plan. So in the back row, we have Shelley Hedgedis, who is our primary district instructional services teacher. Then we have Kim Klein, who's our intermediate district teacher. We have Deanna Lightbody, who is our district coordinator of elementary and middle work. And then we have Amanda Slade on the end, who is our early learning and primary district teacher. So I'm going to ask Shelley and Deanna to come up and guide us through a little bit of that's being done and why we're doing this and why we're focusing on this. Don't touch anything until question time.
First time. Okay. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of our instructional services team, we'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share some of the involvement of some of the things we've been doing in our department to support in the district. You should have some guides, 3 different types, and we're calling these our balanced literacy guides. So this was a big part of our work last year and this year. Our team developed these literacy guides to help begin the process of supporting teachers with literacy instruction in the classroom. We felt with the new curriculum that it was time that our district, we pulled together as a team and really found a document where we could have some common goals throughout the district for literacy instruction and some common language. So everybody was on the same page, everybody knew what it meant to have a quality literacy instruction in the classroom. So this guide is meant to, not be the one and only tool or resource for teachers, but a grounding document to say that in this guide, here's what we believe, here's what we support about literacy instruction, and that in Langley, every student does have the right to quality literacy instruction. So teachers can use this guide to guide them. That's why we called it a guide. And then, of course, bring in their own teaching styles, their own personality, their own favorite resources. But everybody that has the tough job and the honorable job of teaching students how to read and write has a base and a set of guidelines for them to begin. So we developed these guides last year, and they're full force in the district this year, and Shelley is going to walk you through some of the different elements of the guides.
Thank you. So you should have a kindergarten balanced literacy guide, a primary, and an intermediate. Initially, when designing the primary balanced literacy guide, Amanda and I had worked together in creating this document, and what we discovered was that it was so big, because kindergarten is so big, that we decided to separate the guides to be a little bit more comprehensive in each guide. So that's why there's a kindergarten one and a primary and an intermediate one. Inside these documents, you will find comprehensive balanced literacy instructions for teachers to be able to refer to. It's wonderful that we can give these to our new teachers that have joined our district as well. It provides opportunities in there for teachers to be able to personalize their literacy instruction depending on the students that are in front of them. It also aligns to the English language arts curriculum, the ministry curriculum, and also the current research on literacy instruction in the classroom. The guides also connect and build upon each other, which we find is a very effective way for teachers, especially if they are teaching, a 2-3 split, a 3-4 split. They can see the scaffolding process as the years go on and what was learned last year. It encourages communication with other teachers as well. We've been part of many groups that have gone through this document together, and the teachers get together as primary teachers or intermediate teachers and go through some of the basics in the document and work their planning through that as well. And then we're hoping that, that this can be a living and growing document that will be able to go deeper into some of these concepts and some of the instruction. We've developed workshops around some of the areas that teachers can come to. You'll notice in here that there's some consistency throughout the documents on what a balanced literacy classroom looks like, what are the individual, small group, whole group. You'll notice that the primary and the intermediate are very similar. They obviously get a little bit deeper in the intermediate. And so this is what we're focusing on in the classroom to have a well-rounded literacy focus. Each of the documents have common key features. We have an area for the classroom environment, that what the research tells us about a literacy-rich environment, and some ideas there for teachers to be able to set up their classrooms in such a way that promotes literacy acquisition. There's 6 areas of literacy instruction: phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, comprehension, vocabulary, writing, and fluency. And we have detailed ideas for teachers to be able to provide for their students, depending on what their needs are, different aspects of literacy. And also we know that one size does not fit all, and so we have provided areas where teachers can look at the document and get some ideas to provide whole class instruction, small group instruction, and sometimes some one-on-one instruction depending on where their students are at. We also wanted to make sure that reading and writing were connected in there and that we weren't teaching that separately. And that different types of reading and writing instruction is what creates the balance in your classroom. Higher level thinking is also part of all the documents. We want to engage the kids in critical thinking, asking deeper questions. Let's go deeper with that instead of volumes of reading. Let's take a book and go deeper with it and practice some deeper comprehension skills and inferring and so forth. And also we want to be able to allow students to be able to represent their thinking in different ways, whether that be through books or drawing or writing or doing oral presentations. We want it to be multifaceted. We also have some pages in there you'll notice on reading levels and other literacy skills. We have the primary reading levels and the intermediate and some key components in the kindergarten document as to some of the skills that kids learn in kindergarten. We wanted to give teachers an idea of when and what to assess, so that we were consistent through the district. And so we have examples there of different kinds of reading assessments that we can do with the students. And we also have, you'll notice in there, months of the year. What kinds of things would we do in that particular classroom setting in September, in October? You know, teachers were asking us what kinds of things should we be focusing on when kids first come into our classroom. So they're just general guidelines for the teachers. And purpose and strategies for instruction. We want it to be connected to the curriculum. We want to let teachers know that the things that they are doing, that they are answering their why questions. Why am I doing this? Why is this important? Why should I be using this text? Why should I be teaching small group instruction? And then we also have a list of professional resources. We often get asked, can you recommend some professional resources so that I can do further reading and further plan my instruction? So we have those as well. And this is a slide just outlining what we mean by the literacy-rich environment. Okay, we have classroom libraries are the hub of the classroom. We're trying to make sure that every classroom in Langley has a classroom library that kids can access and have a variety of books. We're trying to encourage reading for enjoyment because that's how we're going to hook our readers. And you can see some of the posters there that teachers work on with their students, developing criteria, and just some great ideas about celebrating characters in books and just having a good time reading.
So Shelley described the document, the Balanced Literacy Guide, and what it entails, and so that's the cornerstone for teachers to help plan instruction in literacy. We also provided quite a bit of professional development, so support for teachers through workshops, series of events. This year, the district funded a major speaker, Adrian Gear. We have booked her for 3 evening sessions. We've had 2 so far. We had a great turnout. Over 200 teachers attended in the evening. They received resources, and we had great discussion around teaching comprehension strategies in the classroom. And it was really nice to see schools represented and staffs being able to collaborate and have discussions on what it means in their school and how it's going to work for them. So it was a wonderful opportunity for that team building and that purposeful planning. So that's one way of supporting through professional development. And then, of course, all year long throughout the district, either after school or during collab time, our team provides workshops for teachers. We held a number of workshops on assessment, reading assessment, DART for intermediate, Fountas in Pinnell, that's listening to students read and being able to understand their fluency and comprehension. Kindergarten screening protocol, teachers are being supported with this assessment for kindergarten students. We did workshops on all the different components that you saw in the guide around balanced literacy. What does it look like to have an effective and meaningful spelling program? How do young children learn how to spell? Daily Word Works was a huge event where many kindergarten and grade 1 teachers came to build some and create resources together. And then a huge part of a literacy program in the classroom is having, as Shelley said, that nice and that classroom library, creating a literacy environment. And then of course all the different other frameworks for literacy. How do you run a guided reading group? How do you teach small group instruction? So all of that's happened this year, and it's continuing to happen for the rest of the year. Of course, we go into schools and in classrooms, and the focus is on what does quality literacy instruction look like. It can take on many forms. We've all gone into classrooms and modeled lessons where teachers get to observe, and then we have discussion afterwards. We've helped support classroom libraries, bringing in books, having chance to work together and set them up, demonstrating formative assessment strategies. We have instructional coaches in some of our schools to work directly with teachers on improving students' reading results. And we also get to meet with administrators and support them on how they can improve reading instruction in the school. So it's quite a large task, but we enjoy doing it. The district has provided quite a few resources this year and last year with the implementation of the new curriculum, professional resources for teachers, books to help them design their programs, resources for assessment, and then also resources to support the new curriculum. Every school received quite a few resources to help with the new subjects, science, social studies, etc. And we do get to work with students, even though we don't have our own classrooms. We go into classrooms and support teachers, but also we have a summer reading program. And if you've been around a while, this has been going on in the district for a few years. And the foundation has supported the program and also the district, where students receive, maybe 10 to 12 books at their choosing, get to pick them out and read them over the summer and keep them. And this is meant to keep that excitement and motivate students to read over the summer. So we've supported through professional development, resources, developing the guides, and then supporting teachers and students. So we have time for some questions if you have any.
Thank you for your presentation. That was wonderful. It was very. We do actually have a speakers list started, so I will go to the first person on the speaker, which is Trustee Perot, and then off to Trustee Ross. And then anybody else, please just let me know.
Thank you so much for your work. It's a bit of a heart passion of mine as well. I have a couple of questions for you, pouring out of your labor of love here. The first goal that we're talking about, we said all students, and that, you know, fill in the blanks for the goal that showed up on our first slide, that we'll be introducing, you know, completion. And I'm interested in understanding what are some of the new strategies we might be approaching, most specifically for our readers who struggle, so children on the autism spectrum, our exceptional learners. I know personally, by working with children in that area as well as having my own children, there's been a lot of struggle areas with the typical process that we take in our system that hasn't worked. And these other alternative approaches have been very beneficial for our children to get over that hump, if you will. You know, my young man, he was end of grade 4 before he began to read, and then suddenly took off. And, you know, he's in high school now, and he's ahead of himself. So I think about that demographic group and how we're supporting our children in those areas when we're looking at these goals and outcomes, because the benchmarks are great, but it's the tools that'll get them through. So I'm interested if we're incorporating some of what we would see as non-traditional supports that help our neurodiverse community.
You want to start? Sure. So our hope is that in the classroom, at the starting point, that research-based instructional strategies are the practice for all students. And we know we have, as you said, some students where we can't quite meet their needs through the quality literacy instruction going on in the classroom. So for those students, we have to take a varied approach. And teachers rely on the support from the resource team in the school. And really, it varies from student to student. So we can't really pigeonhole what program would work best for what student until we actually do a comprehensive assessment to see where the gaps are, to see where their needs are. Sometimes it's just an extra good dose of quality instruction, extra good dose of reading, and the student can move on and make progress. But then there are times where, as you said, there may need to be some more rigorous intervention, and so that's left to the resource team and the integration support teachers to design the program for those students.
Awesome, thank you. I have one more question. Thank you. Also, with regard to the assessments, what do they look like, and what is our follow-through? So we're looking at doing these assessments in grade 3. And then, so we're saying we're doing assessments. What are these assessments, and what's the follow-through? So if one of our children or many of our children are falling off that assessment chart, and we're deeming them as needing further assessment, psychoeds or whatever, what is our process that we're going to employ to ensure those children aren't waiting till grade 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to get caught?
The assessments are, I'll speak for the primary, and that is the Fontes and Pinnell assessment that we are using through the primary grades. And that assessment is done one-on-one with the teacher. We use data from last year to get us started. So last year in June, we encourage all teachers to have that data from last year. We look at it very carefully at the beginning of the year. We, while we are building our classroom community and getting things rolling for the year, we are focusing in on the kids that are more vulnerable, the ones that did not meet the expectations for that grade level. And we would do a reassessment on those kids in September and everyone else as time went on, but we focus in right away on those kids. Those assessments are go through reading, the decoding, the fluency, the comprehension, and all of those 3 systems must be aligned in order for the child to be, you know, moved on to the next level, so to speak. So if we have students at the primary level that are struggling with their reading, then those kids would receive extra support in the classroom. They are deemed as you know, students that would be needing to be read with daily. And, you know, you can well imagine that in a classroom of 22 students, it's difficult sometimes to pull those small groups. And so our role as district teachers is to help teachers set up structures in their classroom for literacy to enable them to be able to pull those small groups. And so those children would be read to daily and assessed regularly, whereas other students who are progressing, you know, at a regular rate wouldn't be assessed as regularly, but would be read with and, you know, assessed in an observational sense.
And are you finding you have enough support in the classroom to do that?
That might be a better one to come back to the superintendent.
Certainly it really does depend on the classroom makeup, for one, the little bodies that are in front of our eyes each year. In general, probably not, no. Yeah, okay, and probably not in the sense that we really want to give high quality targeted instruction. And when there are other students, it can become quite difficult because, as you probably know, that it's not just the literacy instruction, but we are also working with social and emotional needs and quite a bit of other things as well. So it's that dance between the two.
Yeah, and we're just working, we work with schools around this very same issue, and hope and encourage that they form a team approach. So the resource teams involved, the administrators are involved, the school counselors, speech pathologists, so that this one child has, you know, a group of adults wrapping themselves around it and supporting the student.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to go on now to Trustee Ross.
Thank you. World class. Fantastic. Are we selling this? Are we making money off of it? Okay. We used to have a publishing arm in the district that would take stuff like this and market it throughout the province. So I that's a question for the superintendent to look into, because this is first class. I'm really impressed. Love the resources. My only comment is I'm a high school teacher. God forgive us. Elementary teachers are wonderful. They make their rooms so inviting. How come high school teachers don't do that as well? And I know you can't really answer that, but man, if we could make our classrooms look like that, every kid would want to be in the classroom. A little library in the back. I mean, anyway, I'll be quiet at this point, but thank you for your presentation. You're a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, Trustee Ross. We're going to go to Trustee Todd now.
So, again, thank you so much for doing this. I often think that sometimes when we set up data and we show results, you know, they say about statistics and damn lies, basically. Because when we look at grade 3 results and it shows that downward trajectory, that's new kids every year. And so I think, and maybe it's just a way of framing it, but positively, if we look at the growth potential or growth mindset, you would show their kindergarten cohort, their grade 1 cohort, their grade 2 cohort, and their grade 3 cohort, and then you've seen the growth that they've done. Because you're comparing 2018 grade 3s to 2017 grade 3s, and I know we have to do that. That's the game we play, but those kids may have come into kindergarten with a number of factors, whether it's assets or whatever, that they were just a little bit lower on their readiness. They maybe didn't know their shapes when they came in. They didn't know their colors. They didn't know their letters. So when it gets to something like this, I think it's somewhat a false thing. I do want to say I really love your emphasis on the small group reading, because that's an excellent intervention. Because small group reading, unfortunately, guess what happens in grade 4? In many classrooms, small group reading fails to exist because class size goes from 22 to 30, and that small group reading just becomes a little bit less manageable. So that's another thing to think about. 3 things. I'd like you maybe just to project 3 things that you would pick that were the best way to change reading results in a perfect class. I mean, I would pick a classroom library, I think that's really important. But I want to hear from you guys. You're the experts.
So, bringing the joy back to reading is number one. And you're speaking of intermediate students, and unfortunately that does occur where the joy disappears. So bringing the joy back. And we are working, Kim Klein and I are working very hard with intermediate middle school teachers, and we do see the light. There is great movement happening in that regard. So bringing the joy back and giving students choice in the classroom, choice of what they want to read. Not all the time, not every day, not all day long, but having that choice brings the joy in the reading. And then once again, the small group instruction, coming back to that, when and necessary, not all the time, but just bringing those students together as a group when the need arises. Those are my three.
Yeah, and I would say that those are mine as well. And in primary, we focus on kids choosing their books and enjoying their books. And just a word of note is we've gotten away from leveling all the books in the classroom library. It's not for kids to see those levels and you know, make statements to themselves that, oh well, I'd love to read that book on sharks, but it's not my level. And we have heard that. So we're trying to get rid of all the levels in the classroom libraries, read for joy, separate them into themes and genres so kids can really, you know, enjoy those books. And also the same thing with home reading. I know that's a big topic in the classrooms that I visit, almost too much of a focus. We all know that home reading with parents is a key element in having kids grow in their reading development. However, as district teachers and teachers, we know that we don't have control over the home reading. And so we are asking parents to read with their kids for joy, finding books that are just right books, teaching those kids how to find those just right books. And you know, hopefully that with parents reading with their kids and teachers promoting reading for joy at home, and then using that small group instruction, that we can align the two and grow readers that really enjoy reading.
Thank you very much. We have two more speakers. So we have Trustee Ward and then Vice Chair Coburn. So over to you, Trustee Ward.
Did I do it right this time? First of all, pardon me, I'll start off with kind of gushing my support of what you guys are doing. I think it's fantastic. As somebody who was not playing a lot of video games necessarily as a kid, but wasting time watching TV, and instead of being having a desire for reading, and now having that desire. I mean, this is fantastic stuff, and 3 kids learning to read, but with all the competition there is, with all the devices, YouTube, Facebook videos, things like that, it's a tough environment to really push the what's developed from the art and science of literacy and reading. So I commend you. I think this is fantastic, and it really encourages me. The couple of other points that I just love is you're touching on critical thinking, the whole oral reading, which I think is just fantastic for so many other reasons, because it also ties into public speaking and things like that. So a lot of crossover skills and success breeding. And you mentioned the joy of reading as somebody, again, who had good comprehension but didn't like it because I was busy playing sports. I think this is something that when it's supported at school and at home, ideally at home, but obviously at school, and kids understand that it's joyful to read something that you like to read. So I think that's great. And so my questions are, and you might have already touched on it because maybe I didn't read it well, and is individual education plan and annual instruction plan. I think you did touch on that, but can you just kind of explain those a little bit? Just the what they entail, like just to understand the individual education plan, what that means. I think you covered some of that, but pardon me for low comprehension. There's 2 acronyms there. Yeah.
You mean what they are?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, I can speak for the IEP, and that IEP is worked on for the individual education plan for the student. That student has been put forward to the school-based team, has some learning challenges, and together as a team of resource teachers, parents, and teachers, a plan is put together so that skills that child specifically needs to learn can be addressed in the classroom, and perhaps if psychological testing needs to happen after that, you know, then that can be put forward as well. And the IEP is the guide for teachers to be able to differentiate the learning for the student, because as we know, everybody is completely different. And so going together as a team, parent, resource teacher, and teacher, we get to know the whole child, not just the reading difficulty or, yeah.
Right, did Trustee Ward, did that answer your questions? Or okay. All right, so our last speaker is Vice Chair Coburn.
So I have two quick. Well, one's quick. The other one won't be. Paper or screen?
You get this one.
Well, if you've been watching the news lately, and it's finally out there for the public to hear about, the excess screen time and screen time for young children can be detrimental to the development of the brain. So in Langley School District, we love students to have a nice, good book in front of them. Yes, there are opportunities for screen time. We don't promote that in the younger grades unless it's something to supplement or reinforce, but certainly not a teaching tool, and a minimal amount of time as possible. In the older grades, screen time is used for research, collaborating, but as I said, not as an educational tool, more as to supplement and reinforce.
Be able to answer. So if not, somebody here will. Right, I like data sometimes. The fun thing about data is it can kind of just be pulled out and dropped. Like my favorite one is kids who don't pass Science 10 don't graduate, right? So kids who don't read by grade 3 aren't typically likely to graduate, but that surely isn't the reason. It's not like, oh, they can't read. There has to be something else going on. So in your experience, what are those other markers that indicate, right? Because I can't believe that a child doesn't read in grade 3 and then we just leave them and then they can't read all the way through grade 12. So certainly it's that they can't read, because clearly they will pick up some reading. So when we take these pieces in isolation, we rob them of their context. And I think the context is really what's important. And so I'd really like to hear what you believe that context is.
That data concerns me as well, for the exact same reasons. And as we know that grade 3 is a culmination of kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, well, and even before that, you know. And so for me, when I look at the grade 3 data, I don't look at it as that child is now, you know, on a road to destruction and doom. But I think it's more important that we take a look at each of the the individual children in those assessments, and really, like someone else had talked about earlier, really focus in on those kids that are struggling and why are they struggling. And to for Suzanne that was asking about, you know, autistic children and so forth, there's so many different pathways to getting them to reading. Just even number one is believing that they're a reader. Is very powerful. So looking at that grade 3 data, I think we have to take a more whole child approach to that data. You know, is it something that they're struggling with in terms of decoding? A lot of kids can understand stories and put together a magnificent story based on the pictures that they're looking at. Well, we all know that's not going to get them far in life, and so there has to be more. But we need to value everyone's pathways into literacy, whether it be their strength, visual strength, or their ability to decode. There's kids that can read like crazy, and when you ask them what's going on in the story, they have no idea. And so that's why those 3 cueing systems need to work together. So I think you're right in saying that if it's a more holistic approach, that I think we can make some headway on that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That does complete our speakers list. Once again, I'd like to thank you for the time you took to make this presentation. It was wonderful, and we look forward to seeing you back again at a future meeting. So we are now on to our last superintendent information item, which is 6.2.4, Human Resources, Hiring and Recruitment Superintendent.
Thank you. I'm just going to now turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan. Timely, just talked about the strategic plan. Human resources is one of those areas that falls within that. An incredible amount of time in terms of and retaining staff. And I don't think we've done enough in terms of putting it out to the community, just the sheer scale of the numbers the last 2 to 3 years that Langley has been involved with in terms of attracting great people to come here in terms of the teaching and support professions. And I thought we need to tell that story. So appreciate Barry being able to prepare a report to share tonight. So thank you.
When to press the button or not. I'm quite terrified about pressing these buttons right now because they flash and do things I don't notice from over there. I'm very happy to give this report to everybody. I mean, we do a staffing update report a number of times throughout the year, and I know that our partner group executives get calls from some people sometimes, and our trustees get calls from people sometimes that have questions about our hiring and why are we doing this and why aren't we doing that, or this doesn't seem to work, or etc. What I'm trying to do tonight and what I hope to share with you that helps is to give you lots of information so that if you do get those emails or calls, you have some information to guide your answer, because we do a lot, but of course we are doing it upstairs here in the board office and you're not necessarily seeing what's happening on a daily basis. So I'm going to comment on a few things. We'll talk a little bit about the hiring process and how that is affected by contract language. We do have questions about our student teachers, so we'll address that. Absences and recruitment. So there's a number of things that we'll touch on as we go through, and I will overwhelm you a little bit with some data, but the data will show pretty definitively what we're doing. So what are the kinds of things that we all hear that causes us to have questions about what we're doing in the area of staffing and hiring? So we hear that Langley isn't hiring teachers as fast as other districts. We're losing candidates, especially practicum teachers. We hear, I know someone who's been waiting for months to hear from Langley. They put in an application, they don't know what's going on. We hear that Langley has a backlog of applicants. We need more people to interview and process the teachers waiting to come to Langley because we have all of these applications we're just not processing quickly enough. We hear that other districts don't have as many TTOC shortages as Langley does. And we hear that Surrey's hiring all our practicum students. So I'm here to address each of these things and to give you all of the facts that go along with having some answers here for you. Come on. Okay, now it's choosing not to work. There we go. So first of all, our hiring process. So our daily process is not exclusively, but mainly through a hiring portal called Make a Future. This is the hiring portal for all school districts in the province, for all applications and all advertising for all positions. So we advertise Make a Future for administrative positions, support staff positions, teaching positions, all of it. This is well known as the main place to look for if you're looking for jobs in the province of British Columbia in school districts. It actually is quite a sophisticated program. You can actually put it in a request at any time a certain job comes up, you get notified by email. So it is the main way we look at it, but we do advertise in other ways as well, but that is the main one. Our wait time for applicants is less than 24 hours. So when people apply for positions in the Langley School District, within 24 hours, they have a response from us. And we start the process. In fact, I checked today, and we have 0 applicants waiting to be processed. If you're hearing that there's a backlog, there isn't. We've actually hired everybody or processed everybody. Not everyone who applies gets hired all the time, but we have processed every single application. In the year where there are more applications than others. So in the spring, when a lot of students are graduating from teaching programs, you'll get a huge rush of applications, and they take a little bit longer to process. But nobody is waiting longer than 24 hours or a day or two to get their application addressed. Oh, sorry. We do reference checking. That's a very important part of our process. We've had conversations many times before about having standards. We don't just hire somebody because they've applied. Reference checking is a place that sometimes can delay the process because you're relying on other people to give you information to send back to you. We don't have a ton of control over that, but we do send the information out immediately, and we do follow up with emails and phone calls if we need to. But sometimes people in other places are not quite as quick as others, and that can cause a bit of a delay. And then usually within the week, even before the references are back, we're setting up a call to get them in to have an interview. Everybody who applies is interviewed and reference checked. So here's some of the data that goes over the last 3 years. Now, there's a number of things that I'll talk about that has influenced our hiring. You can see that in 2016 on the right side there, the hiring numbers are fairly low, and then there's a huge spike in 2017. And that is partly because Langley's a growing district, and we've been growing for a little while, but that's mostly because we have restored contract language in 2017 in the teacher's contract that had class size and composition and caseload and all these different things that required us to hire a huge number of teachers to fill the positions. So that's why in 2017 we hired 362 teachers to our district as opposed to 146 the year before. SEAs have also seen a growth in hiring. 2016 we hired 80, 2017 we hired 72, 2018 this last year we hired 114. So when you look at the totals over the 3 years, and you can see it's less for clerical and youth care workers, but of course there's way fewer positions for those in the district. But when you look at teachers particularly, 752 teachers, if you take 3 years and you take out weekends and stat holidays and you just look at the work days, it works out to about a teacher a day. We've hired a teacher a day for 3 years, right? If you look at SEAs and do the same kind of thing, take out the weekends and the stats, and you just look at the days, you're hiring an SEA about once every 3 days, right? So there is constant ongoing hiring, and there is a volume of people being hired as well. So Make a Future, again, is our main portal for applications that are screened and referenced. If an applicant hasn't heard from us, it's probably for a good reason. And I need to stress that. And we've had this conversation with trustees and groups before. It's important we hire enough people to fill our positions, but it's important we hire quality people to fill our positions. And there are some people who apply who we aren't interested in hiring, just like in any organization, not everybody who applies gets hired. So we do, it says right on our applications that we will contact you for an interview, but we don't contact people necessarily if we don't. But that said, most of the people do get contacted. It's the majority for sure. We did hire over 50 retired teachers last year, from only 9 the year before. Some people have said we don't hire retired people. That's just not true. We do. So this is a lot of numbers, but let me try to sort of break it down there for you. This is an impact of the contract language that was restored in 2017. So when that came back in with the Supreme Court Canada decision, BCPC and the BCTF worked out an agreement as to what our staffing ratios would be like and what would be the requirements to hire. And this is encapsulated in a letter of understanding number 17. So if you hear me referring to LOU 17, that's the rules that would guide us to hire the number of teachers in these different categories based on the restored language. So the top number is just our student FTE. That's just how many students we have. The ratio is the ratio in the language that says for teacher librarian, you need to hire 1 full-time teacher librarian for every 702 students. You need to hire 1 counselor for every 693 students, 1 learning assistant teacher for 1 for 504, etc. The number required is what that ratio means. So for 20,555 students at a teacher librarian or a learning commons teacher of 1 for every 702, that translates to 29.3 FTE of teacher librarians. The actual is how many we currently have. So you can see under the teacher librarian column that we actually have the number of teacher librarians in the district we're required to by the restored language. You can see in counseling we're above by about 8. Now, that's not a bad thing by any means, but we have actually more counselors in the district than than we're required to have if you just look at the ratios. Now, the reason the last three columns have colors is that the rules in LOU 17 says the number of learning assistant teachers, special education resource teachers, so that's the resource teachers in the school, and the ELL teachers can be bundled up together. So you have a ratio for each one, but you actually add them all together as a group. When you look at the orange color, and you add the 40, the 60, and the 38, so that's about 138, roughly 139 total that we're required to hire. The green number is the number we actually have currently. If you add the 11, the 191, and the 43, you get a much bigger number. That 107.706 in the bottom is the number of teachers we've hired above what we're required to by the LOU number 17. Now, there are reasons for that. There is caseload language that factors into this, where you have to have resource teachers to meet caseload. There are some factors that put us in the situation where we need to hire more teachers, for sure, but we actually are far above what the district is required to hire based on the agreement, LOU number 17. And that's a good thing. But it was also a challenge for us, because if you're in a district that doesn't have some of these nuances in their contract around caseload and different things, not judging whether that's good or bad, it's just what we have, you would have had to hire 107 less teachers. So that actually puts a fair burden, you know, on a department to try to hire the numbers that we're trying to get. All good stuff, and we have hired all of these people. But I'm just trying to share with you some of the challenges that we face. And some of these are unique Langley challenges. There are lots of districts that don't have to do this. There are some that do. It all depends on what your local language is. Do we hire back retired staff? Yes, we do. But once again, not everyone who applies gets hired. We're required through human rights statutes to treat everybody equally. So just because someone's retired from the district, they don't get any special consideration or special preference. They have to apply like they were anybody else. They have to go through the process like anybody else. They have to meet our standard just like anybody else. Because to do anything different is favoritism. Okay, it's giving one group gets treated differently than another, and that could be seen as a human rights violation. So we treat everybody equally. They all have the same process. Now, if you're retired from Langley, we don't ask you for the same wealth of documentation as someone who we've never seen before. We usually ask people that we've never seen before to provide us university transcripts and different things so we can verify their background and history. We don't ask for that for a retired person. We ask for a cover letter and a resume. And then, but from that point, they go through the same process. They still have to be interviewed. We still have to have reference checks, because to treat anybody differently is a problem. So in 2016, the total number of teachers hired was 146. The total retired that year were 59, and we rehired 9 retired teachers. You can see the number jumps quite a bit in 2017. We hired 46, and in 2018, this last year, 37. So we are hiring back teachers retired. We do the same for CUPE, but the numbers are quite a bit smaller. You can see that in 2016, we only rehired back 1 person, 4 in 2017 and 1 in 2018, but we get very, very few retired support staff applying to come back. In fact, in some categories, we get none for the last 3 years. So there aren't any to process, but there are some that are rehired. Other factors that impact teacher vacancies. So when we look at different positions in the district, they have impacts in hiring. So we have a number of, and some we just spoke to you today. I don't know if there's any left. There's not. But the group that spoke to you today are amazing district teachers. Most of them are seconded from positions in schools. So every time we bring someone up to the board office to do the incredible work they do, we have to replace them in a school, and they're replaced in a term. If it's a secondment, it's term. So that's a good thing that they're here providing the work. The challenge is how do we replace them? And we have been doing it. Yikes. We have job share language with teachers, which is generous. It's not the same in every district. And that's a good thing. People can share their jobs, and that works out really well for people's lives and the different things that are considered. But job shares sometimes are hard to fill because sometimes they can't find a job share, and then we have to try to help them find a job share, and then it's these little chunks and pieces of work. So it's not a bad thing, it's just an impact. One of the things that we struggle with is when a TTOC accepts a position in a school, like they're covering a vacancy for someone where we're trying to fill it, they can opt out. They can say, yeah, I'll go in for a couple of weeks, and then 2 days later say, no, I really don't want to do that, and book themselves out. That's a challenge for us, because we have no way to make them go in and say, well, look, this class is going to be empty for 2 weeks while we're trying to find the teacher. We need you to be in there. They can agree to do that, and many do. This isn't something everybody does, but there are some that don't, and when they say they don't want to anymore, now we got a problem to fill it. The new non-enrolling positions due to the contract language. So because of the huge number of resource teachers that we've been hiring, a lot of those teachers are our own teachers coming out of the classroom to take the resource jobs that are now available in the school. So then, of course, now we have classrooms positions to fill. So sometimes the shifting around of staff as they're filling positions can cause us challenges. And, you know, we do have some concerns. It's something that's shared all across the province. Again, it's not a judgment, but what happens is TTOCs are paid the same on scale as a classroom teacher. That didn't used to be the case in the past. That's a good thing, but the incentive to make more money to go into a full-time position isn't quite the way it was before. So finding people to go into positions is not quite as, you don't have quite the lineups of people looking for work that you used to have in that regard. Something we just have to work out and work through. We hear sometimes that people say way more people are leaving Langley than coming to Langley. You know, a bunch are going to Surrey, or they're going to Abbotsford, or they're going here and there. Well, it is true that some people are leaving and going to other places. All of this extra work that all of the districts are hiring provides opportunities for people who maybe live in Richmond and have been commuting here for all this time, but now there's work in Richmond. So I can live closer to home and all of that. So that does happen. But you can see in every case, you know, people who are leaving us is smaller than the people who are actually coming to us. Because a lot of people come here because, you know, house prices aren't necessarily as high as places like Richmond. You know, it's a different kind of environment to live in. Langley has, you know, the rural and the urban, and people are looking sometimes for these things. Plus, we have a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunities. So there's lots of reasons. More come to us than leave us. TTOC shortages. So Chilliwack has about 160 TTOCs that they have active. These are people who are available to take work. And they have, they're short about 20 or 40 a day. Surrey is short 40 to 80 per day. They have over 900 TTOCs, yet they're still short 40 to 80 a day. Langley, we're short about 15 to 30 a day, and we have 275 plus, because we continue to hire all the time, TTOCs. The issue around TTOC shortages is far less a volume issue, like do we have enough? It's far more a choice issue, right? People just, for a variety of different reasons, aren't taking vacancies and like we hoped they would, right? But that said, we still continue to hire TTOCs. We haven't stopped, right? But you can see if even half of those TTOCs that we have take work every day, we'd never have a shortage, ever. But they don't, so. Student teachers. So a lot of people say, why aren't you hiring all the student teachers? They're right here, they're doing work in our schools, why aren't you offering them work? Well, we are. In fact, this last fall, we had 16 student teachers and we hired all of them. In fact, we took a couple from some other districts. Our history with our student teachers is we hire literally all of them. Okay, if you're hearing differently, it's not true. We do. Now, they often will get hired in other districts too, because they're allowed to do that. So it's not unusual for someone to hire in Langley and Surrey and maybe Abbotsford or something, and they're trying to figure out where they go. But we're still hiring them. They're still on our list as well. Oops, there we go. What's our process with student teachers? We meet with them the day they show up. When they come to do their placements at the school, like the first week they're at the school, Mark Petrick, Michelle Guillou, they're out at the schools meeting with them. hi, how you doing? Welcome to Langley, we're thrilled you're here. You know, if you have a successful practicum, we want to hire you. Here's some things for you to consider. These are the documents you're going to need to prepare while you're around. If you're interested in Langley, they'll answer questions, they'll talk about things. We do that right up front on the very first day. We take them on tours. We do all sorts of stuff. We talk to the administrators to get references on them. We try to speed up the process by getting references in advance, because one of their references is obviously going to be their sponsor teacher and the principal at the school. So we work on getting that quickly. And then we invite all the student teachers in for an interview and we offer them work. So we, you know, the only student teachers who usually don't get hired, and it's not many, are the ones who don't have successful practicums. Other than that, they get hired. And we encourage our schools to take practicum students. We're just going to, this list up here is just to show you that all of these schools do accept practicum students. We get them from UBC, SFU, we get a lot from Trinity, we get some from the University of Fraser Valley. Of course, we don't get them from places like UVic and the Island because they don't tend to come over here and do practicums, but we do get them from anybody else who can. And we have them placed in all of these different schools. We track it, we monitor it, we follow up on it, and we meet with every single one of them. In fact, Michelle Guillou was supposed to actually be here today giving this presentation instead of you listening to me, but she's actually in Alberta right now at the University of Alberta and the University of Calgary attending teacher fairs to try to encourage Albertan teachers to come and work with us, and every year some do. And they do because we go out and ask them to and show them what a great place we have. Okay? We've done a number of district efforts to try to, and we've worked really well with the LTA on trying to do different things to sort of mitigate the problems we knew we were going to have filling positions. We do have, for TTOC shortages, a local agreement on teachers being able to volunteer their prep time to help cover classes. This has been very beneficial, especially at high schools, because teachers can help out in covering the classes, and they get a bonus for that. We email our TTOCs every 2 weeks. We send our vacant list of jobs to our active TTOCs every 2 weeks and say, here's all the work available. Because sometimes people's situations change. They start the year in September and they're thinking, well, I don't really want a classroom job. I want flexibility. I'll just be a TTOC. Then I can, do whatever I want to do with my life or whatever. A month or two changes and all of a sudden, hey, I'm ready for a classroom position, or maybe I want something different. So we keep them up to date every 2 weeks saying, here's the work available, here's the work available, here's the work available. And it works. Some people then contact Michelle and say, hey, I wasn't ready before, but now I'm interested. And we get people into classes that way. We work collaboration with the LTA to fill postings. Sometimes we've had to get creative this year on doing different things. People will say things like, well, I want that job, but I have a pre-booked vacation plan that, I can't change at this point. And we find creative ways to work that out. Whereas in the past, when we didn't have a lot of shortages, it would be, well, you kind of have to take the job as it's offered. But we find ways to make it work because we want teachers in front of kids. We don't want classes with rotating TTOCs. That's not good for anybody, or without teachers. Staffing for teaching and QP remains a priority. Every single day we're hiring. Don't ever think we're not hiring. You could come up to HR any day of the week and you will see hiring going on somewhere in HR. It's constant. And then we do lots of external postings and additional links to other career sites. So even though I talked a lot about Make a Future, we do advertise on different job boards in different places. If we're looking for a specialty teacher, like one of our special teachers in learning support services for hearing or something, we'll advertise through some portals that they access. We do all of that kind of thing to try to get the word out as much as we can. What do we encourage to mitigate our TTOC shortages? One of the things is, teachers sometimes have to have a leave for one reason or another, which is perfectly fine. We encourage them to book their leaves as soon as possible. Our struggle is, and sometimes I know people can't book it in advance because things happen the morning you wake up and you just didn't know. But any time that you know in advance, we encourage both our QP staff and our teaching staff to book it as soon as possible, because the earlier we have the information, the better chance we have of filling the vacancy. So that's something we constantly say to people. If you know something's coming up and you're going to take a leave to address that of some time for a day, like you're going to use your personal day or something, the sooner we know, the better. We do share TTOCs with Surrey and Abbotsford, so if they tell us early, we kind of lock them in, and that really helps us out. Okay, and then recruitment. With Trinity Western, we have met already with the cohort on January 8th. We have a cohort of student teachers here from Trinity right now. We did meet just the other day with the group at Langley Meadows. We go to the career fairs. Last week, I think it was UBC, and I said, you know, Monday and today, they're up in Alberta. We do fairs at SFU, UBC, etc. So we do our best to cover all those bases. And that's it.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We do have a speakers list,
Sure.
and so I do have some questions or comments. So the first one is Trustee Ross, and then we have Trustee Wilson.
Thank you. What are the challenges? Like specialty people. Like, what do you need specially? I never hear about a bus driver. Do you know bus drivers? I don't know. I've never heard anyone say.
It's actually hard to find bus drivers if you want to know the truth.
See, I need to know that. It would be really helpful because I'm always talking to people, right? And what French teachers, I guess, is the other one I hear.
French teachers, shop teachers, other specialty teachers are hard to find. A lot of QP positions like bus drivers are very hard to find too. We have, like bus drivers are a really good example. We have an ad that's all the time out for bus drivers. Sometimes a month will go by before an application. So it's not because, it's nothing to do with Langley. There just aren't that many people out there who are qualified bus drivers looking for bus driver work, right? And that's just one example. There are other examples as well.
Thank you. I'm a TTOC in Mission and in Chilliwack. Mission calls me the day ahead of time. It's wonderful. So I get a call at 3 in the afternoon, I take it, and boom, I'm in. Chilliwack doesn't call till 5 in the morning, right? So I've already cleared off my schedule. No, I can't work because I'm available in Mission.
Sure.
So do we call out a day ahead of time?
We have a work board system where people can actually book themselves. They can see whatever's been posted. This is why, tell us your absences as early as you can, because it goes out in the work board, people can see it and they can book in. Sylvie upstairs does book people the day before, both for all of our staff, not just for teachers. The ones that get calls in the morning are the ones that call us in the morning. So we will every morning start the morning with maybe 75 TTOC call-outs that have already been processed. We might get 35 calls that morning. Just last minute things, my child's sick, I'm sick, whatever it is, all legit. But those are the ones then Sylvie has to work the phones, right? So it's a combo.
Thank you, Trustee Ross. Now we have Trustee Wilson.
Great. So the slide that you had where it had the shortage of 15 to 30 TTOCs per day, was that just reflective of teachers or all staff?
Okay, don't know why it's doing that. I press this button. No, that's just teachers. I would say with SEAs particularly, we're probably, and don't quote me, but I would say on average we're short about 20 a day. It varies, but on average. Some days we're short none, but.
Oh yes, I can. Okay, I actually have two more.
Sure.
The list where you showed the what we're required to have for the teachers. Yeah. No.
It's a chart.
It's going to get there.
Animations are great, but not when you go backwards. So.
There we go. So under the LA or learning assistance teachers, I noticed there's a negative 28 there.
Yes.
And I know when I was working in the schools, like it was a real gray area for learning assistants, and those students often aren't designated with an IEP and don't have the wraparound resources that the other students have. So are we actively seeking more LA teachers, or because we've bundled the way we have and we are exceeding what we're actually required to have, are we not searching for them?
So the ministry funds us for the total number of FTE that you see there that we have, the green, if you add all the green up. Because we've had such a huge shortage and a huge need of resource teachers because of the CASO's language, that's where we've been putting our efforts. Not that we're not hiring anybody else, I'm not saying that, but that's what we've been focusing on, because we need to get, we only had so much funding. We had a requirement to hire so much, and it was the resource teachers that were the priority, to be quite honest, at this point.
And my last question. Okay, my last question was that I saw that with the hiring back of retired staff, it talked about only one for CUPE for the last, and you said that in 3 years there have not been many, but I think what happened is for a long time, most CUPE staff were led to believe they wouldn't be rehired, and many did apply and weren't interviewed or had anything happen. And so I think what we need to do is maybe let the word spread out there that they will be, you know, looked at and interviewed or whatever the process is, so that we can maybe hire some SEAs or some places where we're short, bus drivers, who knows, and increase those numbers, because we have good staff that retire that we could retain. So
yeah, and I would, there we go, I would agree totally. Because to not hire people just because they're retired is discrimination. That's not what we're interested in. But when, for whatever reason, and I can't speak to 5 years ago or whatever, I don't know, but for whatever reason, maybe because they're just not interested, or maybe, like you say, some of the interested ones have given up, I'm not sure. But if people are going to start applying, they're going to be treated fairly like anybody else. Yeah.
So I have Trustee Ward and then Trustee Todd.
Did I do something wrong? Is that right?
No, you're good.
Okay. So thank you. Excellent education for me as I see what our challenges might be. One question would be, we have, I think, 43 schools, if I'm correct. I think there was 31, I randomly counted how many schools with student teachers. Yes. So I understand you're not going to get them at all, but why wouldn't we have them at all schools, or do we try to equally distribute them throughout the district?
So a practicum placement, requires also sponsored teachers at the school. Okay. And for a variety of reasons, very legitimate often, some teachers just aren't in the place right now to say, I want a student teacher. And so that's usually the case in some of our schools. It's just nobody, it might be a really young staff and they're not feeling confident to take on a student teacher yet. It might be people who have done it before and they want to break for a year, different things. So the practicum placements are voluntary in a sense, right? People come forward. We talk to the principals and say, talk to your staff, and if people are interested in a student teacher placement, please let us know. And that's really how the process works.
Thank you. Did that answer your question? Okay, Trustee Todd.
Thank you. Thank you for your report and answered many of our questions, many of them asked previously. Are there any plans to go to an online absence portal? I know other districts have done so, where it basically cuts down on the calling, the back and forth. You just go in, request your leave, or if you're sick.
Yeah, it's all, our work board and everything's all done online.
It's all done.
Yeah, it's all done.
It's
yeah,
all online.
Absences are recorded online. Yeah. Oh, those are emergent things, right? So people wake up in the morning, I'm sick, and they just, they don't go on their computer and log it in. Sometimes they do, like that does happen, like it's not exclusive, but usually they phone because they know somebody's at the EOC desk. It's easier to just make a call and go back to sleep if you're sick, right? Okay.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions or comments on this item, so thank you, Assistant Superintendent. That was a wonderful report. So we have come to the end of the information items, and so we are going to need to move a motion that the Board of Education receives the superintendent's information item reports as presented. Moved by Trustee Perot, seconded by Vice Chair Coburn. All those in favor? It's carried. We are now moving on to the Policy Committee reports. Just before I hand it over, I'd just like to introduce our new Policy Committee Chair, Trustee Wilson. So she is going to be delivering the reports, and there are some notices of motion that will come out of tonight. I was chairing at the time when some of these came forward, so Trustee Wilson may use me as a resource on a few of these, but without further ado, over to you, Trustee Wilson, with item 7.1.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think I will just move the policy and then I can speak on it a little bit and if people have questions. So we'll start with 7.1, which is policy number 1400, trustee indemnity. Recommendation that the policy committee recommends that the Board of Education serves notice of motion to the district's education community and its education partner groups that it intends to adopt the revisions to policy number 1400, trustee indemnity, at the March 12th, 2019 regular board meeting. Can we have a seconder?
Moved by Vice Chair Coburn, seconded by Trustee Perot.
Oops, I was lit up. I pushed the button. So this policy came before the board last spring. It came from a federal tax changes that came to all trustees. And there was a committee that made recommendations, and those recommendations were moved last May, I believe. And so now it's out there for us to vote on March 12th or bring back. So if anybody has feedback, this would be the time to put it through.
So we are putting it out for notice of motion, like Trustee Wilson said. If there is any feedback, that this would be the appropriate time for that to come. The reason why it wasn't voted on at the time is we couldn't vote on changes that hadn't actually been enacted yet in legislation. I mean, there could have been a change in direction from the federal government at any point. We have, if you look back through the minutes, already debated and discussed and made the changes to remuneration and all the rest of it. But this is sort of a housekeeping to bring the policy to be up in line with the current federal tax laws. And I do see a speakers list on this. So we have Vice Chair Coburn and then Trustee Ross. So I'll clear the list, and then Vice Chair Coburn, if you'd like to ring back in, then we'll go over to Trustee Ross.
Said that it was a committee that made the recommendation. I just want to point out that the committee was external to the school district and no trustees sat on the committee, and that there's very clear guidelines about who should be on that committee and where the information comes from. I think that's important that the public knows.
Thank you, Vice Chair Coburn. Trustee Ross.
So my question was just, how do people give feedback? You know, we won't be seeing this, some of these folks for a month and a half, 2 months, till March. Is it feedback at sd35.bc.ca? Well, I'm not sure what the tool is. Is there an email address that we could?
So over to the Assistant Secretary Treasurer. So the website does have all of the information related to feedback with the website, and we do publish it, and it is shared. And as I mentioned before, the entire report that was done by an external committee, we've already as a board considered it. We're just releasing the information to bring our policy up to date with the current legislation. So, but those that do want to provide feedback on any item can go under our notice of motion sections. So you moved second to put that out for notice of motion. So now you're on to the next one.
The Board of Education serves notice of motion to the district's education community and its education partner groups that it intends to adopt the revised administrative procedure number 4009, smoke-free environment, at the March 12th, 2019 regular board meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder?
So moved by Vice Chair Coburn, seconded by Trustee Ross.
Okay, so this came out of I believe BCPC recommended that boards consider any workplace policies related to drug and alcohol be updated because of the cannabis legislation that came into place. So we have been reviewing these policies and they are open for feedback in the way that we just discussed. So if anybody else has any comments.
So all those in favor of serving notice of motion? It's carried.
Okay, next we have Administrative Procedure number 6227, Employee Substance Abuse and Related Conduct. Recommendation that the Policy Committee recommends that the Board of Education serves notice of motion to the district's education community and its education partner groups that it intends to adopt the revised Administrative Procedure number 6227, Employee Substance Abuse and Related Conduct, at the March 12, 2019 regular board meeting. Do we have a mover? Ms. Coburn, Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Perot. So this came out of the same BCPC recommendations, so we reviewed this policy and it's open for feedback. Any questions, comments?
Seeing none, all those in favor of serving notice of motion? It's carried.
Next is Policy 2306, Travel Expenses, Trustees and Excluded Staff. Recommendation that the Policy Committee recommends that the Board of Education serves notice of motion to the district's education community and its education partner groups that it intends to adopt the revised policy number 2306, Travel Expenses, Trustees and Excluded Staff, at the March 12, 2019 regular board meeting.
So moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Todd.
Okay, and this is mainly to bring this policy up to date because I believe it was 1997, if I saw, that was the last time it was looked at. So there were quite a few things that seemed a little behind the times. So we've reviewed it and it's up for discussion.
Right. Any questions or comments before we vote on serving notice of motion? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor? It's carried.
Okay, next we're on to policy number 4008, consumption of alcoholic beverages on school district property. Recommendation that the Policy Committee recommends that the Board of Education serves notice of motion to the district's education community and its education partner groups that it intends to adopt the revised policy number 4008, consumption of alcoholic beverages on school district property, at the March 12, 2019 regular board meeting.
Moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Perot.
And this also came to be one of the ones that we look at to follow BCPC's recommendation of updating our policies.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on that notice of motion? Trustee Ross? We good? Okay. All right, seeing none, all those in favor of serving notice of motion? Motion's carried. That concludes our policy committee. Thank you, Trustee Wilson, for bringing these policies through, getting them up for feedback from our community. We appreciate your report. So we are now on to new business.
Okay.
And so the first item we have is motion 8.1. Over to you, Trustee Wilson. You're first up, right? It's actually just a motion, not a notice of motion. I'm still on that one.
It's a motion.
It's a motion.
So I will make the motion and I'll just read it out here. Whereas the municipalities of Langley are located in the Metro Vancouver region, whereas the Langley School District faces many of the same issues, including a growth rate similar to the Metro region boards, and whereas the Langley Board of Education is requesting the support of the Minister of Education to include administration of our district staff in the Metro region, be it resolved that the Langley Board of Education submit an extraordinary motion to the 2019 BCSTA AGM on or before the deadline of February 14th to request that our school district be included as part of the Metro branch region. Seconder?
So we have mover Trustee Perot, seconded by Vice Chair Coburn. Trustee Wilson, do you want to speak first on this?
Sure. I know that this has come up in the past, and there are several good reasons that we've probably all heard that we should move into Metro. I know our municipalities belong to Metro, and also I know a lot of our union partner groups belong to labor councils that are in Metro, and so it just seems we should, instead of having just one or two things that are still stuck in Fraser Valley, we should just, as a whole, move into Metro. There are many benefits.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this motion? Trustee Ross.
Just for the sake of the few people that are still with us, can you give us some background as to why we haven't been successful up to this point? Can any staff or comments make any comment on that?
So for Trustee Ross, no idea. We've been pushing for this one for quite some time. Our networking for most of our groups is with Metro. There's compensation issues around it. Whether that's a piece of why that's been delayed, no idea. But I can assure you that this has been something that we've been requesting from all of the different groups for a number of years, and certainly appreciative of trustees considering this as something to go forward.
And I spoke with the minister just recently, and the minister has requested that we forward a letter to the minister for consideration. It is a sort of a mystery to all of our organizations that we interact with why we are, as a municipality, part of the Metro Vancouver region, but as a district, we're part of Fraser Valley. Is that something that's left over from before? Nobody knows, but I think a great first step is us as a board to request that change, to show now, okay, as trustees, we're part of Metro, and move forward and continue to support the request. And do that before we send that letter off to the minister, so we can say, and further, we've made this move. Trustee Ward.
For the sake of clarity and transparency, isn't the primary impetus of this to get adequate funding? I mean, that's the thing, as compared to Metro, compared to Fraser Valley, because it's a different distinction. So, for competitive for compensation.
For sure, for some of our groups, not all of our employees benefit from a change, but some of ours do, and it does create a competitive disadvantage with the groups that are affected by that. It's also a networking thing. A lot of our groups, choose to attend Metro or do attend Metro, but some of our resources that we get are very specific to our region, so it does benefit in that way too, not just monetary. So there is that aspect. You're correct. Yes. Right, so seeing no further speakers on this, all those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. All right, so we are now on to motion 8.2, and it is motion from Trustee Todd.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So before, in December, we did move an emergent resolution to go to, or actually it was in November, dealing with the issue of seatbelts on school buses. And it was determined at the BCSTA that it was not an emergent issue, and there's certain parameters. So I'm back at it again because it's still an issue, at least with me, and shared by many people, that that seatbelts on school buses make sense. So with the recent announcement of a task force by Minister, the Right Honourable Mark Garneau, the Federal Department of Transportation, is once again going to look at the issue of seatbelts on school buses. The BCSTA need to be ready to start talks nimbly with the provincial government to secure funding for the retrofitting of many of our buses that are out there. So the federal minister can change the regulations for school buses, which means that all new builds would actually have seatbelts on them. But the expensive part for school districts around the province would be retrofitting their current fleet. So my resolution, and there's typos in it, be it resolved that as soon as the federal task force to look into the possibility of outfitting school buses with seatbelts has released their findings, the BCSTA start negotiations with the appropriate provincial ministries to secure funding and a timely response.
Seconded. Ross.
Okay, so Trustee Todd has moved that motion. The seconder is Trustee Ross. Trustee Todd, do you want to speak first to your motion?
I think I fairly have spoken to the motion. Basically, just to clear this up, that once the federal minister releases the findings of this task force, that will probably determine whether all new builds, and this is, there may be a cost factor that we as a district don't necessarily want to shoulder immediately to get our current school buses having seat belts. Plus there's also conversion factors that they have to look at, things like basically sensors in the seats to know who's wearing it, kind of the similar things that you have in cars, whether the seat belt has done. There's also there's new technology. I did a little research on this, that the 6 or 7 largest American states have all got seatbelt legislation now on the books. So it's a growing trend, certainly in North America, and there's several other jurisdictions that has done it too, New Zealand. So I'm hopeful. It's a better place right now, but I do think that the provincial organization, the BCSTA, needs to be willing to enter into those talks as soon as that report comes down.
Are there any other speakers to this motion? Seeing none, thank you, Trustee Todd, for bringing it forward. But the only thing that I do hope, and I was very relieved to see that there is a federal task force looking into it, and I think it's very important that we're there when the funding costs, or when the funding conversation takes place. I mean, we don't want to leave that to somebody else to decide. We don't want that cost to be downloaded because we just can't shoulder it. My understanding is it's very expensive. And when you are going to have a cost that affects a level of government, they should be at the table. But one of the things that I do hope is that the federal task force does get the right people to the table. I want to see, the Canadian School Board Association, each of the provinces' respective provincial organizations at the table, are transportation people that work in the schools every day, and our secretary treasurers, those types of organizations at the table. So whoever is directly affected by that should be at the table. So I do support your motion. Just one of the things that I think that as trustees, when we're at Fraser, our various branches, we should be checking in and asking questions to go back when we have our representatives there. Are you at this table? Are you being consulted from this federal task force? Because if they aren't, we need to hold that account. We need to hold the people who make the decision of who's part of the task force accountable. Oh, I do see a speaker. So, Trustee Ward.
There we go. Okay, I'll get it the next meeting. I'll figure it out. So my question is, you use the word retrofitting. We had some discussion before here or there. Just the word came up, and I think I brought it up. But did the task force, is that part of what the task force findings are going to cover? They're going to see what the cost of retrofitting is, or is this primarily the cost? Secure adequate funding for newer buses, or is it primarily the retrofitting? Because that's what seems to be implied.
Trustee Todd, do you want to answer that, or? Sure. Okay.
So yeah, my resolution is actually about the cost going forward for the retrofitting. The task force, I'm just basing it on the CBC News release. The transport minister announced a task force on school bus seatbelts. So the task force is actually just looking at that issue. The federal minister has the authority to mandate seatbelts. So he can do that on his own for all new builds. For existing school buses, this is where it's federal, provincial, that split. For existing school buses, Garneau has said that will require consultations with the provinces to determine where money to retrofit school buses will come from. So those conversations then click in. The first decision that needs to fall into play is seat belts on school buses, and that's what the task force is specifically set up. Because you're aware of the Fifth Estate thing that said that the decision they made way back a while ago was a faulty decision, and there's been updated surveys that talk about how it would save student lives. So the first issue will happen or B, their report will come out, they'll make a decision, then we'll start talking about retrofitting school buses.
Thank you. Trustee Ward, did that answer your question? Okay, and thank you, Trustee Todd. I don't have any more speakers on this item. The motion has been moved and seconded, so it would be then forwarded to AGM for debate. So all those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Okay, so we are on to trustee comments. So last time I believe I started on my far right, so today I'm going to start on my far left. Trustee Wilson, do you have any trustee comments? Trustee Ross.
You know, I just want to say how wonderful this board office is. I just came in today and saw this new facility, and of course, it's just wonderful. So kudos to the staff and the superintendent and his team for creating this wonderful environment. It's really classy, and yet it's very, you know, it can be used during the week, and everything moves around, and I'm just really pleased with how it's all come together. So the other surprise I had, the superintendent and I actually toured around the building with former superintendent. When I was first elected to the board, Emery Dosdell was our superintendent, and so I invited him out to sort of review what we'd some of the things in the district, and he met with the superintendent. We had a great time, so just a wonderful time. Thank you.
I think tonight I just want to say thank you to our partner groups. I really appreciate the fact that you're here night after night on public board meetings. I also want to acknowledge that we've got a bigger public tonight, including several candidates during the last election. We do appreciate you coming out tonight, and also to the greater public out there, hi, watching at home. We appreciate your support, and so thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your attention tonight.
Thank you to everyone, and have a good night.
Yeah, I said a lot tonight. Thanks for coming. Good night.
So I just do have a few comments. I just wanted to say that we haven't really been back here since the end of December, and December and January have been really great months. As a board, we've had several opportunities over that 8-week period to partake in governance training together. And all of our trustees have come together, and we've received training through our provincial association, BCSTA. We've had some in-service training in the area of governance, and we've worked together as a board to build our skills. And it really is, I have to say, an incredible privilege and honor to be part of this board. We have trustees who come to the table every day willing to put their time and their preparation and all of their effort into improving themselves as trustees and building new skills and sharing the skills. We all come to the table with different skills, and it has been an incredible honor to spend time with each one of you through the process of building our governance skills, and I feel I've learned an incredible amount from each one of you. So thank you for coming in so fully, because this year we've had so much training all at once, and also thank you to our staff for the hours you've put coming with us to it. This is, I can say, in the number of years that I've been on the board, single most number of governance training opportunities we've had. And they've been fabulous, but they take a lot of time away from your family, a lot of time for staff to come with us. So thank you for taking those on and continuing to build, and for us to have this opportunity to grow together, because we do as good a job as we're willing to put in. So how we represent to our public, what we're able to offer to our public, what we're able to do back here in our governance role is we put out as much as we put in, and this board has really gone above and beyond in the first 8 weeks, and I'm looking forward to growing with you over the next 4 years. And thank you for all the opportunities you've given me as chair to grow in my role. So thank you. And I want to thank also our tech people at the back. You know, you really get these meetings going. I know you've been doing some changes for the perspective back there and sharing out on social media and all of that. And you're here till the very end. So thank you for the role you play. It's really important to democracy for people to be able to participate even from home. And thank you to our new communications person back there, Joanne Abshire. Thank you for coming out and spending the night with us, and we're looking forward to working with you. So those are my comments, and thank you to our partners and everybody out in the audience for coming out tonight. It's wonderful to see you all here. So those are my comments, and we're on now to item 10, which is question period. So just a few ground rules for those who have not been here before. The end of our board meeting, we offer an opportunity, of course, for the public to ask questions of clarification. We welcome these questions, and we want to ensure that those who come to the table ask questions which are directed to the chair and not to staff. They need to be related directly to a topic that's on the agenda. They need to be succinct, focused, and not a statement. So no preloaded statement and, you know, I'm getting to a question. It's like, whoop, here we go. Just succinct. And they need to be respectful. And they may not be asked if they are related to a personnel or directed to an individual trustee. And they may not be asked if they are related to contract negotiations. In line with board policy 1204, as chair, I may answer or I may defer to staff, or I may indicate that we're not able to answer the question at this time, and we will come back to you. And we do appreciate your interest. We want to make sure that we have a professional meeting. So once again, we do welcome questions that follow those guidelines. Are there any questions this evening? Approach the podium. And please state your name too.
Hi, my name is Cindy Jeffrey. I have a few questions on different subjects.
So we'll start with one question at a time, please.
That makes a lot of sense. One is concerning the mental health issues we're having in the schools. I'm wondering, are we having people coming in the schools to work on these different mental health issues that we're dealing with? I think the amount has probably gone up over the years. Different situations are happening. Or are we farming all these out to other experts in the field to assist the children, or what is being done in that area?
So is this in relation to the MDI presentation received tonight? Okay, so that question, Superintendent, is that a question that can be answered, or is that a question that we need to go back to the asker? Okay, Superintendent.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you for your question. And so it's a blend. We have Renge Bailey as our district principal that has responsibility in this area. She works with many others, all of our counselors, works with a number of community agencies. Some of this is trying to direct families to resources and trying to be able to do that. And some you can do in-house in terms of depending on the severity of the needs. So we've got a blend. It's a nice example in terms of our strategic plan where we can't do it alone. We absolutely have to work with our community to do this in terms of to meet the scale of needs there. And I think we also do a lot of professional development in terms of with our staff about how to identify when this is occurring so that they can make sure that they direct kids in the right channels too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent. And your next question?
The next one I have is, I know that we're short teachers. I know we've had ones, rehires, things that have happened is good. But look at your scale there, we've gone down by one. So what are we doing to attract new teachers into our district? That is not the exact same thing that every other district is doing for themselves. How are we trying to attract new teachers to us here? Different than everybody else, because maybe we're being greedy, but we have to think about what we are doing different. Is there anything different?
Okay, thank you. Superintendent, once again, is that a question you're able to answer, or would you like to defer it?
But Assistant Superintendent, would you like to answer after?
Sure. I actually don't know exactly what every district is doing. I know some things that are common that we're all doing. So I won't be able to say definitively that this is different than other people. We are traveling all over the country in many cases to try to attract people. We are As I said in the slide presentation, we're putting out reminders, we're following up. We have a 24-hour response to people so they know they're not waiting. We advertise on multiple sites. We go out to the schools. We go out to where the teachers are. I would suspect most districts will do most of that as well. And to be honest, I'm just not sure what other things we could be doing. There are some districts that do incentives and different things. This district hasn't chosen to do that. Those are both good and bad, depending on how you look at it. But we consider all different avenues. When someone comes forward and says, hey, I have an idea about how you might, we explore it every time.
So going by your answer to me.
Just over here through the chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Going by the answer. Okay, was said that some districts are doing incentives. Has it shown that giving incentives has changed at all in the numbers of new teachers applying, or is it the exact same thing as districts that are not giving incentives?
I'm not sure if we're going to be able to answer that right now or if that dimension's been looked at, but what I'll do is I'll just ask Superintendent, are you able to address that aspect of the question this evening, or is that something that would need to be looked at and go back to the speaker?
I think one of the things you're finding for the incentives, a lot of that's outside the Lower Mainland because it's really tough to attract people in some of our northern and interior communities. And also, again, as Assistant Superintendent Bunyan pointed out, in terms of when you do that incentive piece, you have to be careful because those that came before go, why'd you miss me? You know, why is it you just do that for others? So I don't think that's hampered us at this point, but I still think you can certainly be creative in terms of getting your message out. And one of the things that we're one of the strongest in the entire province on is Pro-D. We have so many teachers come here because they say you have the best professional development in the province, and we want to be part of that. So that is something that sets us apart a little in itself.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Yeah, sure, a lot of questions. Going to the presentation we had on student learning development, I noticed that when the screenshot came up, the graphic of the classroom that were involved in giving these talks together, that was from one of our local schools here. I noticed that almost all of them were girls. Now, are we striving to bring the male boy students into this more so? Because it seems like they are not being involved enough in this issue, because we have to make sure that the boys are also in these programs, although a lot of times girls do mingle better in that way than boys do. But I want to know, are we putting anything to invite the boys to get more involved with this situation compared to the graphic you showed of the school, where I say probably 95% were all females on those tables?
Superintendent, is that something that... Are you referring to the balanced literacy one, the literacy presentation?
It was under student learning and development. And I think it was Yorkson School they're showing pictures of. I can't remember what school that was. They showed all the people, two groups of students there.
Yeah, that would be the balanced literacy one. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so in that, it's just in terms of the images, I wouldn't read too much into that. In terms of it just may have been, I think it was a bit of a sheer fluke that females. I think what they're trying to do on the male piece, it's made a big difference. And the last word we use is choice. You got to find areas of passions for kids, and there's certain books of the past that I struggled through also that I wasn't all that thrilled about, and I think I would have loved to have had the range of choice the kids have now. And I think that's been one of the biggest attractors to Brain Boys. But I wouldn't read anything in terms of the
No, that was just a girl day out or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Do you have any other questions?
One other question. When we came down to the reading, for students reading the levels they're doing in the primary years, I want to know, first of all, that the reading scores, every year they do the scores of the province, every school in the province, what level they're at, and the ratio. The Langley Fundamental School is usually higher in the reading area. Now, what's the difference between the Fundamental Choice School and the non-choice schools? Their levels are lower. Is there something that they're using in the Fundamental School that we should also use in all the schools if their teaching that they're doing there, their method of teaching there is helping students get a better reading level than just the non-choice schools? There's something that we're not introducing to all the schools to bring them to just a good level as that school.
So just to clarify, are you talking about the Fraser Institute numbers?
Yeah,
or?
yeah.
Okay. All right, assistant, or, geez, sorry, I just demoted you. Superintendent.
No, we weren't going to tell him that.
Sorry, that was later.
I might welcome that by the end of the night. So on that, the Fraser Institute, I'll be honest with you, I put no credibility into
I know that. That's
whatsoever.
okay.
It's a horrible thing.
That.
But I can tell you that they don't actually measure reading with that. They measure a whole lot of other things, but not reading. We don't compare use our reading results to compare schools, because there's all kinds of schools with more challenging demographics at times that could play into this.
I understand that.
I can also tell you that we have a number of schools within our district that are equal to and exceed also the fundamental school.
Yeah.
So I would be very cautious. I think what we use the data, just so you're clear, is that it's really to get a measure where a child's at for their own personal needs, so that we can determine as professionals what do we need to do to be able to allow them to exceed past their current level, and so that they can be successful. So I'm just always cautious about the comparative piece. That's all. And this district again is doing, as you heard tonight, a lot of good work in that regard.
So go back to what you were just saying, that other schools are doing really well in the reading areas there. Is it just different reasons that they can get higher levels than other schools? Is it demographics, or what is, or is it just a combination of things that the kids can't grasp more as same as those schools you're referring to?
Superintendent, are you able to answer that question?
Yeah, I would just say it's a whole range of...
Okay, I'll let it go. Because it's complicated. I understand that.
And just so you know, if there are points where you haven't received clarification on a question, you have some more really specific questions where it would take some research, you can always email the board, and we'll ensure that you get an answer to those more specific ones.
Okay.
Was that your last question?
No, one last one.
One last one? Okay.
I know some schools right now they're using for reading sight words a lot. Sight words. I have my kids coming home, actually my grandkids, they come home with their books, and they get, every time they have pages of sight words. And she's trying to look at these sight words, but she can't say the sight word. She says, why, let's use phonetics. Let's sound out the word, the letters, and then she finally understands what the word is.
So if I could just, that would be a very specific question related to your child. That would be more appropriate to have us have a conversation at the end offline.
Okay.
Because we won't be able to answer that. So if it's going to be a general question, like...
I'll change it for you.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Are they also using phonetics the same as they're using sight words for in the schools?
Superintendent, can you answer that?
So in terms of anything to do with the reading program, in terms of literacy practices, what I think would be better for me to do is line you up with someone from instructional services to be able to say, here's what we're doing.
I see.
Okay, so if you want to direct your question to me through an email, then I can get somebody to get back to you in terms of specifically say, here's what we do and don't do.
I'll do that. I'll do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all of your questions. It was wonderful
you.
to have an opportunity to answer them, and
thank
have a
you
great night.
once again. Thank you all.
Are there any other questions? Oh, Reverend Ron, if you can introduce yourself, please.
I just have a question about on line 462, the LGBTQ. Mr. Superintendent Gill is in charge of that. My question is that committee open to the public?
All right, thank you, Reverend Ron. Superintendent. My recollection of the LGBTQ committee was that it was an invite committee because it was an internal one. I do not. Assistant Superintendent Gill isn't here tonight, but if you'd like, we could get that answer more solidified for you.
Yeah. I have left, just so as a point of information, I have left my name and my phone number with him. I believe personally that if they're going to be invited to that, we need to have collaboration within the community. Clergy, teachers, which probably are on that committee, trustees, of course, but there needs to be a greater collaboration, in my opinion, as we have found a number of challenges in this community right now. And I'm asking humbly, but I'm asking specifically that committee could open itself to a greater collaboration. Thank you for your help.
Thank you, Reverend Ron. We will take that to the Assistant Superintendent, and we will be reaching out. Thank you. I do not see any further questions, so thank you for those that did ask a question this evening. On that note, could I please get a mover that everybody's just like thrown me off now because you're in such a hurry to get out of here. Could I please get a mover that the meeting please be adjourned at 10:08 p.m. Moved by Trustee Ward, seconded by Trustee Wilson. All those in favor? Thank you, everybody, for hanging in with us tonight. Have a great evening.